ACP dated July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2028. Item 2, OR 2024-0032. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing budget transfer number 20-25-1 in the amount of $2,300,000 from the Health Department's General Fund salary line 130111010-50110 to the Health Department's miscellaneous expense line 130111010-56699 to increase the amount of the contract with Worldwide Traveling Staff Incorporated by $2,300,000 to cover the total estimated costs for the provision of temporary nursing services in New Haven's schools for the period of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. Item 3, OR-2024-0031. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 2 for fiscal year 2023-24, pursuant to Article 7 of the City Code of Ordinances and Sections 2-388 to 2-397. The city seeks approval to assign $3 million from the general fund balance for educational purposes. Item 4, LM 2024-0610. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders reallocating $5,500,000 from previously approved American Rescue Plan projects for the purpose of supplementing funding for eligible American Rescue Plan projects and general fund fiscal year 2024-25 budget line items and capital projects. Item 5, OR 2024-0030. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1 for fiscal year 2023-24, pursuant to Article 8 of the City Charter in Section 2-385 to Section 2-389 of the Code of General Ordinances. Transfer number 24-999 is seeking approval to eliminate negative line item balances for the fiscal year ending 6/30/24. And item 6, LM 2024-0510. Order to read and file the updated budgetary and financial reports for the month of June 2024 in compliance with Article 8, Section 5 of the Charter. These items are on file and available for public inspection in the Office of Legislative Services, 165 Church Street. Per order, the Honorable Adam Marchand, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance at 203-946-7651 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY. Public comment/testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting. The meeting may be viewed on the Board of Alders YouTube page. Whew. So that's the official notice. We will now have attendance of colleagues on the committee, starting to my right.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Good evening, all. Yvette Hamilton, Ward 24.
Sal DiCola, Ward 18.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Sal Michael, Ward 17.
Honda Smith, Ward 30. Faisal Myers, Ward 23.
Thank you, colleagues. I also wish to recognize our colleague Alder Brian Wingate from Ward 29, who is here with us. We have a very full agenda. I just read through it. It was a lot of technical sounding stuff. So let me just speak in plain language about what the game plan is for this evening. I see that there's a good number of people here to take part in proceedings, and we're glad to see you. Here's how we will proceed. The first item is the ratified agreement between the city and the police union. That will be the first item tonight. The second item is a request to increase the maximum amount of the contract the city has with a nurse staffing agency. The Those are the first two items we'll do this evening. Then we will proceed to actual items 6 and 5 in the agenda I just mentioned, because they deal with the last fiscal year. There's the June monthly report, and then the transfers, the year-end transfers we do every year after the fiscal year has been closed. We'll do those two items after the first two I just mentioned. And then the final two items that we'll hear tonight will be related to the Board of Education. One is a $3 million assignment of fund balance monies towards possible contingencies with the Board of Ed, and the other one is a $5.5 million reallocation of ARPA funds. So if you're here for those really important Board of Education items, please know that they're the last two items we'll deal with this evening. We have other items we're going to be hearing first. Now, all of these items are public hearing items, and after we hear presentations from the proponents of the items, usually the administration, and the alders ask questions of the makers of the item, then I will invite members of the public to come and testify. If you wish to testify on the item, you will raise your hand and I will call on you to come forward. When you testify, you will have 3 minutes, members of the public. After you're done testifying, first of all, you'll tell us your name and address as part of the record, but then you will help our staff person, Don Hayden, who will raise his hand. Well, he's right there. There we go. You will like to write your name down for him so we can get it correct for the record, right? So that's when we have the public hearing portion of the meeting. But there will be a moment for public testimony after each item that we hear. So it'll be important for you to, if you don't have anything to say about the item we're currently talking about, then don't raise your hand and save it for later when you do have something to say. That's how we shall proceed this evening. Again, because we have a long agenda and we may have quite a few people who wish to testify on some of these items, we are going to have a 3-minute time limit for members of the public to testify. So think about your comments, make them strong and make them concise so that you can deliver them in the time allotted. Again, thank you everybody for being here. We'll proceed now with the first item in our agenda, which is the ratified agreement between the City of New Haven and the Elm City Local. And I see 4 people coming forward. Please, thank you for being here. We might need an additional chair if we're going to have 5, which we can get. Looks like our chief of staff for the mayor's office is getting a chair. Once you are all settled, we'll ask for your names and addresses for the record. Thank you. Thank you for the papers, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm not sure you have to update it. There was a change made.
So there's 2 dates put together.
It's July and January.
Gotcha, thank you.
That's
We'll just take a moment to distribute the papers. Thank you so much.
The one you have with your package, you should probably just start. Shannon, can
I think everybody has the papers. Why don't we have introductions?
Sure. I'll start. Attorney Floyd Dugas, from the law firm Bertram Moses. I am outside labor counsel for the city.
And I'm Wendella Alt-Batty. I am the labor director for the city.
You may give a business address, but you'll need to give some kind of address.
33 Cold Spring Drive, Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Thank you.
375 Broad Street, Milford.
Thank you.
Carl Jacobson, Chief of Police, 15 Westerly Road, New England.
Shannon McHugh, Budget Director, 925 Orno Grove, Waterbury, Connecticut.
Lawrence E. Ocado Jr., Police Union President, 1 Union Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you.
And we'll just make sure that that gets sworn in front of you so everybody can hear. Thank you.
Good evening, members. This is a contract with a duration of 7/1/22 to 6/30/28. So it's a 6-year contract. The wages from fiscal year 22, 2.5, which is retroactive, 23, 2.5, also retroactive, 7/1/24 retroactive, 5%. And the subsequent years, 25, 26, and 27 are all 5%. The city's health insurance was accepted by the union. It's the same health insurance that we brought before you in the last 6 contracts, with the exception of the cost share for the police union. 7/1/24, it's 18%. 7/1/25, 19.5%. 7/1/26, 21%. And 7/1/27, 21.5%. We're also using the rate has been the previous rate was the fully insured equivalent. It is now the allocation rate. Life insurance has been increased to $25,000 from $15,000. Medicare Advantage at age 65 and over. The newest thing that we've added was what's called a drop plan. That's the deferred retirement option plan, which allows employees to retire for pension purposes, but continue to work for up to 5 years. The pension benefits are put into a separate account, and it's only accessed once the employee completely leaves the city of New Haven. This is a benefit to the city in that it helps us to retain active members for 1 to 3 to 5 years longer than we would have been able to. Members are also allowed prior city service, which allows an employee to get credit or transfer their time for pension purposes. There's also a prior city service buyback, which allows officers to purchase pension credit for time spent in other departments or other police departments of the cities. The city has now implemented or will be implemented a new change. Patrol will move from a 5-3-5-2 schedule to a 5-3-5-3 schedule in exchange for giving up their C days, which are a total of 7 C days to pay for that. The administrative schedule has been changed from a 4-3-5-2 to a 5-2-5-2. They also give up 6 H days. There's some miscellaneous other languages under the contract. The city may civilize the public information officer, social media, and the police detention facility. We've updated some of the language, contract language. Employees shall not make it's payroll will be strictly by direct deposit. Just a couple of other language cleanup, which I'm not going to go through. It's outlined in the package that's been provided to you. Our budget director will direct you or inform you on the financial impact of this contract. Shannon?
Thank you. All right, well, to start out with, I put some of the goals of the negotiation there. I'm not going to spend too much time on that slide. But, some of the, as Bella just pointed out, the major provisions were wages, insurance, pension, drop plan, and some schedule changes in terms of financial impacts. If you go to, I didn't remember the pages, my apologies, but changes to wages, they're outlined here. There is one important thing I'd like to highlight is that we have increased the first year police officer salary and the second year. And the idea behind this is to recruit and really help with attrition and ensure that we have enough police officers, which could help offset overtime. So I'd like to point that out as well. And then we do have the retroactive increases were 2.5% for 2022, 2.5% for 2023, and then there was 5% for 2024. These amounts have been calculated, if you turn the page to the retroactive wages, and I've broken it out per year. It's about $5.6 million in retro pay. Half of it to be paid out within the first 30 days of the contract signing, and the remaining balance 18 months later. And then there's a new salary scale. I kept the history of the salary scale so you can see the difference year over year. And you can see that the starting salary in particular really does increase. And again, we hope that will help with the overtime and the attrition, which could save money over time. The next page is the gross wage comparison. I do apologize for having the page number. As you can see, the current costs of the budget are included, and then each year didn't calculate. I apologize for that. Also, you have the current costs in the second, or the light blue row, and then you have the costs when you add the salary increases. So it is there on the third line, actually. And you can see the year-over-year increase there from FY23 through FY2028. This is a comparison between our starting salary and some of the other cities within the area and their starting salary, and we really are trying to make ourselves more attractive to be able to attract a larger hiring pool. So we think this is important for those efforts. And then there is the deferred retirement option plan that we have shown here. And again, our hope with this is that we will retain qualified officers and people along the ranks, again, to ensure we have solid service and hopefully offset some overtime, things of that nature. And then there are the changes in the healthcare and work rules. We didn't really do a financial analysis of this, but we believe that these scheduled changes will improve the work-life balance of the force. Again, hopefully affecting the attrition and level of hiring. And then thirdly, there's some healthcare highlights here. Or lastly, we do see the increase in the contributions from the employees, which does lower slightly the city contributions, and it does provide some savings, not a significant amount of savings, but several $100,000 a year. And there were some changes to the prescription formulas, and the retirees, at 65 could switch to Medicare Advantage. So that is essentially the presentation, just to have it on a nice, easy to look at summary. As far as funding these increases, we have done an analysis. I can hand it out. I have enough copies if people would like to see it. Of what we believe it would be cost on an annual.
Why don't you pause in your narrative as the sheets get passed out, and while we're passing out the sheets, I will also recognize colleagues who've just arrived, Elder Farrar Santana, who's joined us, and Elder Festa as well. So why don't we get all the papers in front of people before you can. Two different things or the same thing? Oh, okay. I think we all have it, so
Okay.
please continue.
So the biggest cost is in the first year. The retro payment, we have estimated about $5.6 million. This, at the time we did the analysis, we believe this was a conservative number, and we wanted a conservative number because we weren't sure at what point the contract would be finalized. So there's a little bit of cushion in there. And the reason, how we did that is we included, and this is true of the annual salary increases as well. We use budgeted numbers versus actual numbers. So there's quite a bit of vacancy within the department. So we included all those vacant positions, and we also included, there's some holding, that we're budgeted for $1 to hold the positions within the budget. We assigned a dollar amount for those positions as well, to make sure it was all inclusive, and that we had a nice conservative number, because it was important to overestimate and make sure we had enough so that we could cover this. So I do believe it is a conservative number, as I've said. I've added the starting salary impact, the $185,730. And then there's some salary savings with the increase in employee healthcare contributions. That's a rough estimate. We had some analysis done by a third party. But we do believe there'll be some savings associated with the increased healthcare contributions. So all in all, for the first year, you see that the total dollar amount is about $9.4 million, which is quite large. And then on the side, I've included some of the contingencies within the budget that could be used to fund these increases. So we have budgeted $6 million in ARPA revenue replacement, which we did not use in 2024, but we have $6 million in the budget for 2025. So those funds are available. We have $1.7 million in contract reserves. And then we've also budgeted about $1.5 million in salary savings due to the vacancies. I believe this number is conservative, and we probably will have a higher number than that. But if you look at those numbers in total, they just about cover the increase that we have estimated for 2025. Again, acknowledging that I believe that the 9.4 number for the total payment is the conservative number, and likely be a little bit lower than that. So that is the budgetary impacts based on the analysis.
Just a point of clarification, in your earlier narrative, and I think on one of the slides, you mentioned that the $5.6 million in retro pay, half of that would be due in 30 days, the other half 18 months later.
Yes.
Which of course is in the subsequent fiscal year.
Yes.
So would that reduce the fiscal year 25 impact of the retro?
Yes.
Okay, so some portion of that, half of that would be actually in fiscal year 26.
That would be correct.
Okay. And the $6 million in ARPA revenue replacement, that's in addition to the 5.5 that's being proposed to be reallocated?
Yes, the 5.5 for reallocation is what was budgeted for 2024, which we did not use.
Yes.
This is for 2025.
2025, gotcha. Thank you for that. Continue. Anybody else wishing to add to the presentation?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I would add that to put this in its proper context, when we went into these negotiations, we figured it would be a typical negotiation in terms of what the other settlements were. But what happened during the course of this negotiation is the state experienced a statewide shortage in police officers, people wanting to be police officers and qualified people. And whether you're in New Haven or Westport, people are scrambling for police officers. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking officers from different departments. And all that did was, aside from adding to the chief's woes, obviously changed our view of the contract, the wages it would take, and particularly with the starting salaries in order to recruit and retain good police officers. And what I would also add is, I think the chief would agree with this, this is pretty much a transformative contract for the city, not only because it's substantially bumping up the starting salaries, but by adding the 5-3-5-3 schedule, it provides, as was noted, a little bit better work-life balance for police officers who, particularly after COVID, after significant shortages, I think are pretty well stressed. At least that's what the chief has advised. So I think, it's a large part of the response to what's been going on in the marketplace. Will put New Haven in a much better position than it is right now to provide adequate police officers on the street, and I think that context is helpful to point out.
I think it's also important to mention that the officers gave up their C days in order to pay for that schedule, that new schedule that they will be getting, or to schedule. The C days amounted to about $750,000. And that was the compromise.
Just for note, C days are days off that can be taken anytime during the year. So that's also extremely difficult because they may try to take a C day at a time when we have less officers on. But now with the 5-3 schedule, we'll be able to have a thicker detail and know who we're missing and make sure we hire the right number of people. If I could have 2 minutes.
Please.
First I want to thank this team up here with labor, budget, the mayor, the union president and his people. I think it's really important to look at this as a good deal, that long-term savings of this deal. You know, look at what it costs for the city to have a homicide or a major incident. One homicide could cost us anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 just in overtime and resources. So the more officers we get here and have on our streets, we're going to reduce the number of critical incidents and we're going to take care of this city in a much better way. Moving on from that, like Attorney mentioned, the pool of candidates is extremely small and we're struggling to get candidates. So I want to give you an example. In the summer, we did a process. We got 46 applicants. Bridgeport, who had a newer contract, paid more, got 400 applicants. They were able to put 40 in the academy. We were only able to put 9 of that 46 in. I've already seen an increase in our upcoming recruitment. We have over 78 people signed up. We have 4 officers who previously left us looking to come back just based on the talk about the contract, right? So this is a game changer for us. Also, I would note the drop plan, the schedule and the wages are going to help us. So coming into December 31st, we had the potential of 39 people leaving. 8 of those would have been supervisors. I would have had to get rid of the district managers again, or go down to 2 district managers for the entire city, and stuff that the city really doesn't deserve, right? The city deserves to have the way we police, with community policing, with walking beats. So with the talk of the contract and people knowing what's going on, that 39 number, to our knowledge, from us talking to people and figuring out, is shrunk to 7. From 39 losses to 7 based on this, that's a huge impact. And that allows us to build on what we have, not restart a police department. I think if we went longer and waited, then we would have lost those 39 people and all that knowledge and all that stuff that a lot of these people bring to the table. Because I'll tell you, we got really good cops and we got really good supervisors. So that is a huge thing. The mental health ramifications of 5-3, but not only that, there's other stuff in the contract that you can only be ordered 3 days a week, 24 hours. You can, if you come in on your day off or a vacation day, which a lot of the new people won't, because they know they're gonna get ordered for 16 hours. Now, you can't get ordered. So they're willing to come in, which, what does that do? It reduces the number of people we have to order. So that's a huge mental health issue that is gonna help us. The other thing, the online reporting. Online reporting is excellent. There's a lot of reports that are done out there just so people have for insurance, or that go into our database and then store for us for data. Officers are responding and taking those reports. Now people do them online. But before we shut it down, we had 90 reports in there. That means 90 times an officer didn't have to go somewhere. Somebody was able to report it themselves. And we're gonna put in a whole infrastructure that falls up on those reports and make sure that people are getting the services they need. And then the retro pay. I think we needed to show our officers the respect of the, there was some talk about not overtime or overtime added in. Most of these men and women had to work. They didn't want to work. They got ordered to work. So I think we had to pay them the retro pay based on that. And I really appreciate the city's negotiations and the union's negotiations to lower those first couple of years to make sure they got all of that money that most of the time they didn't want to work, but they worked. I can already feel the difference in the police department. I can already feel the difference with the discussions about this contract. And I give the people at this table a lot of credit because it's going to change, keep us going in the right direction, but put us on a whole nother level. Now, I could talk forever. You know that. I've been up here before. I'm going to cut it there so I don't talk forever. But again, thank you to everybody at this table, and thank you for considering this. And I hope that we can find and pass this.
Thank you very much. Further comments from the panel about this contract? You, sir, would you like to add a few words?
Sure.
Glad to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. To kind of echo what the chief said, we were in serious trouble, in terms of staffing. Will it fix the department in terms of its staffing levels overnight? No, but I believe with this deal, if considered and passed, it's definitely going to help us in the right direction. The chief has mentioned district managers and walking beats and bike beats. Every district is different. You're going to get some of those things. I think with higher level of staffing, towards our budgeted strength, it's going to help with that. I believe that. One of the things that I think a huge change in this contract was adding the drop plan, right? Deferred retirement option plan. Keeping our most senior people, whether you're a patrol officer who's been on the street for 30 years, or you're a captain running the patrol division. That institutional knowledge, not walking out the door, staying on in the police department, it's only going to help the constituents, I believe, because they're going to be able to pass on that style of leadership and that knowledge to the less junior officer, whether it's a junior captain or a junior officer. I think that's just invaluable. And I hope if you have any questions, glad to answer any.
Thank you very much, sir. Any further comments from you all before we go to questions? Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for the handouts that we've received. We'll now have questions from members of the committee, and the queue is open. I'm just noting hands going up. Give me a moment to register those hands, and then I'll call on you in order. I just want to remind colleagues before we go into the queue that there's so much we could talk about in terms of community policing and the police department. But what we're talking about tonight is this agreement that's before us, the terms of it, and whether or not it will help the department be more successful in its goals, the fiscal impact. So we should have our questions focused on those things. We'll start with Alder Hamilton and then Alder Furlow and Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Marchand. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. 389 sworn officers this contract will be budgeted for. That's correct, right? With that, new officers coming in, have you put in anything in place about retaining folks that, okay, we train them, we invest in them? Is there a policy in place that to say, hey, you can't leave 6 months after we've trained you and invested money in you? Maybe
I'll just interject real quickly, because the way I would ask that question is there anything in this agreement that would enhance the city's ability to retain officers? Because we're not going to have a general workshop on officer retention.
Right. Yeah,
that would be held by the finance committee.
Retaining officers.
But what does this agreement do
to retain?
Yes, so there's nothing directly in the agreement that says that, but I'll tell you what will retain them.
Mm-hmm.
We will be one of the first police departments with a 5-3-5-3 schedule, so we're making a commitment to people to have the time off to deal with a job like this. We will be one of at least the big city departments will be one of the highest paid big city departments. You see younger people, they go towards the money. We've also implemented, it's not in this agreement, but different career pathways with our officers. It's real important to test. We have a captain's test, we have a lieutenant's test, we have a detective test, so they know this movement. We are constantly putting people into our units. I know that's not directly in the contract, but this allows us to continue to do that and be the police department that we can be, that has always retained its officers.
And for I want to ask you, Mr. Akkad, with this contract, do you feel like it's going to enhance the officers to stay within the police department, the seasoned officers that are there now?
Yes, so I think one of the biggest questions from the seasoned officers, if I may, they've asked me, as I think of about 10 minutes before I arrived here for the meeting, is that, hey, is this today where it gets signed? Because I'm looking to enter the drop plan, right? They're looking to stay, they want to stay, they don't want to work at another police department. they're happy that they're willing to stay and, lend their tutelage to the next younger officer, which we do have an abundance of. And I think having that seasoned officer willing to do that, I think is gonna be monumental.
Thank you, gentlemen, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Alder Fairwell. Followed by Alder Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. We all know there was a lot of work that went into this, and we appreciate it. I just want to kind of follow up with we have 308, I'm looking at the fiscal impact. So we have 389 sworn officers, but what was the budgeted, what's our vacancy? Is that's where the cushion is, right?
I actually don't
If you
know
could
that.
have the microphone.
So if you count all the officers, including the dollar positions, our positions go up to 417. But fully budgeted is 389. Right now, as of today, we have 328. So if you say the 328 to the 389, which
Yeah, it was
it's
considered
61 budgeted positions, but then if you add the 17, which we could use someday too, it goes a little higher, but definitely 61 completely vacant.
And those 61 vacancies are included in this number.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I think it might be, I'm not sure if it's useful or not. Okay, I'm just thinking it might be useful to get that actual number rather than a budgeted number, just to have an idea. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to request that if that makes sense to you. And
More?
okay, yep. And my final question is in regarding retention. I think I heard it said that Bridgeport has already satisfied their contract or ratified their contract. These other two cities, do we know where they stand with their
Yes.
contracts?
Yeah, Waterbury about 2 years ago settled their contract. They went to be the highest paid city. I think it topped out at 96 or 97. I think we go a little bit higher than that when we're done with our 6 years, which is.
Waterbury?
Yeah, we will be higher than Waterbury at the end of our 6-year contract. And Hartford also settled their contract. We actually had people preparing for our academy, and go to Bridgeport. Now I've heard rumors of it, and I'm trying to confirm them. We have some Waterbury and Bridgeport officers that might want to transfer to us, and we've never had that. So it really puts us in a position to pull outside officers with experience as well.
Thank you, Chief. I'm just trying to understand the numbers, just kind of doing the calculation in my head. So when we get to the 4-year mark, will that still keep us on par with our other major?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, great. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Fairwell. And we'll follow up on the issue that you raised before about the costs.
Thank you.
Next is Alder Walker Myers, followed by Alder Fester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is, well, before I start my question, I just want to say I appreciate all the work behind this contract because I was hearing from tons of people that really wanted to get it done. This question is for the chief, and I won't hold you to it, but I just want to know, do you believe that having our pay change and higher in the front of this contract is going to have a direct impact on our next police academy, or do you think it's going to take a longer time to feel the actual impacts of that?
No, because when you look at the impact, a starting officer got 50,000. Now a starting officer goes directly to 70,000. That's huge. Again, Bridgeport was at like 60. I think Hartford was at 65. So they were all beating us out. Now that jumps directly to that. We've already seen the numbers jump. I only have 46. I have 79. By the time we take the test in mid-November, I'm hoping to have over 100. So we're already seeing that impact.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Alder Fester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. And for
Alder
being
Fester, if you could just have that a little bit closer so that everybody can hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
I'll just repeat what I said. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your presentation and for being here, for having some positive news, particularly for our police department. I'm just looking over and trying to understand the 5353, because it sounds like we're going to have overtime due to the 60 vacancies. So how is that 5353 going to affect the actual scheduling?
So I met with the detail room several times because I was worried about that myself. So right now, we currently have, I think it's 3 day-off groups where we split the officers into 3 different day-off groups. To create a 5353, we're gonna split them into 8 different day-off groups. Now, there will be a little less officers per day-off group. And then overall, it'll be a small decrease in the number of officers, but I'm talking like 1 or 2 per shift, that's it. So we'll still be able to staff the city, break them up into different groups, and I believe, and we ran the numbers, it'll be the same overtime cost. So the overtime cost for 5253 and the overtime cost for 5353 will be very similar. So we're still gonna spend that money because we have those vacancies, but we're not gonna spend hundreds of thousands of extra dollars.
Okay.
Because they've contributed to the cost by giving up what they already had, some of the things that they already had.
Yeah, great point. So you would have all these officers put in all these 7 different days off at different times, and per contract where you have to let a certain number take those days off. They're not gonna be able to take those days off. They get their days off more structured.
Okay, so it's not taking away days off, because the 5353 actually gives them a few more days off. So the C
Absolutely.
days are gone, which gave them flexibility in the days off, but they're still getting probably the
Extra
same
days
amount,
off.
extra days off. So in essence, that adds even to their vacation time. et
And
cetera.
it's more cost effective. doing it this
But I guess once we implement this 5353, we will see through overtime numbers. Because what are we using the vacancies for? It sounds like we're using the vacancies for a lot of things, for paying overtime, for making up for some of these salary changes. We only have, 61 vacancies from what was said? So I'm just wondering
But the vacant positions, as the pay increases go up, they're also worth more in value as well. So, you're gonna see a change in overtime, obviously, because everybody's getting paid more, right? But I would attribute that to the increase in salaries, not the change in schedule. And we're gonna do our best to make sure I've been through it up and down with the detail. We have to be able to be cost effective through this contract.
Okay, I guess, only time will tell, but so when we say, because I wrote down something you actually said in the beginning, the officers have more days off.
Yes,
Okay, so when we talk about C days, that they had to give that up, they only gave up the flexibility of when they could take those days off.
yes.
So they didn't give up any days.
Well, but there's a cost affixed to those days. So if they got 5353 and had those C days, you know what I mean? So it's not day for day, but they gave back money to the city so that the city could afford this, I guess.
And I only say that because, that's an additional perk in my eyes.
Absolutely.
So that needs to be pointed out along with everything else. And it's, another way of attracting police officers to come into New Haven.
Absolutely.
So, these are important matters to really bring up. Okay. I know you said, it makes it conservative, these numbers, I get it now, how it's making it conservative, because that was a question too. And what happens, I'm sure this was mentioned in other times that you all were before us, but the detention center, is that just what's happening with that?
So the state has given us opportunity to give it back to the state marshals. That will give us 5 officers and a supervisor back per shift, which will save us a ton of money. Yeah, I think that the final date, and Mr. Cotto might know, but I think it's January 2026, so it'll be a year from now. We'll be moving towards that in the next year, which will save us a substantial amount of money.
Yes, perfect. Thank you for that clarification. I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues? I have maybe a couple. I want to just bring our attention back to this sheet that our Director of Management and Budget distributed. And you characterized it as a conservative estimate.
Yes.
By which you mean like a bigger
Right.
estimate than it might be. And that estimate was $9.4 million
Yes.
for the impact. But if we take 2.8 out of that, because half of the retro will be done a year from now,
Yes.
it brings it to about 6.5.
Yes.
So is that, in your view, a reasonable at this point estimate for the fiscal impact of this contract in the current fiscal year?
Yes, to bring that down to 6.5.
Okay. So then the question for us is, what do we make of that impact versus the service enhancements that we hopefully realize, the better protection of residents that we realize? Is that a good use of additional money that we're going to need to spend on our police services? That's kind of what's before us.
Absolutely.
Mhm. I just want to also point out for colleagues and for folks here to understand that there's another piece of this that we'll do later, which is that the budget will have to be amended because every position is listed in the budget, and now, if this passes, those positions will be at the incorrect amount. Then there will need to be transfers that will have to be requested to move money from one category to another to pay for these things. So some of the things that colleagues may have asked for around a more exact accounting of the impact of the, I suspect we'll get that when those requests come in for the budget amendment and for transfers, because there's not enough money in contract reserve to pay for this contract. It's gonna have to come from other places.
Yes.
And so that will have to be before us in the next period of time. Not to mention overtime costs will change. Hopefully utilization will go down as more people join the force, but in the short term, we're gonna see our OT bill go up considerably, like very considerably. So college should expect additional transfers and budget-related amendments before this committee in the future to adjust and cope with this new contract, should the Board of Alders approve that. That's all I have. Questions from colleagues before we invite the public to weigh in? Seeing none, we want to thank you for your presentation and thank you for all your hard work on this very important matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as these individuals make their way back to their seats, I will remind everyone here that what is before us is the contract between the police union and the city. And if you wish to testify on that item, not the other items that might come up later, now's the time to do it. We don't have a sign-up sheet tonight, but we can cope. If all you need to do is raise your hand if you wish to testify on this item. Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? And the second time, is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? And for a third time, anybody here wishes to testify, please raise your hand if you want to testify on this item. Seeing none, we will now proceed with the second item on our agenda, which is a requested increase in the contract between the city and worldwide travel staffing. It's the firm that provides nurses, contract nurses to the city. Who's going to come talk about that? Someone from the administration needs to come forward. When it's on the agenda, the administration has to come testify about it. Okay, we'll manage even without handouts. Once again, names and addresses for the record, please.
Hi everyone, Ron Gizzi, 219 Raymond Terrace, Camden.
Shannon McHugh, Budget Director, just moved 925 Orinoco Road, Fulton, Connecticut.
The floor is yours.
Okay. This request is to provide nursing services for the health department. The health department has had many issues in attracting and retaining a sufficient number of nurses. They have a budget line item to employ nurses, but given the competitive nature of nursing and the salary requirements and many other issues that are leading to, significant difficulty in attracting and maintaining nurses, the health department has been utilizing Worldwide Traveling Staff Incorporated, which provides the services, and it is a contract with the city. So they put forth the contract, and there was not enough money in the contractual services for the health department. However, there was the salaries that had been budgeted to hire the nurses. So basically, they're transferring the salaries for the nurses to fund the contract for the staffing agency.
Anything to add, sir?
So the vacancies basically are covering the contract.
Thank you for that very concise explanation. Just a quick question from the chair before we move to the rest of the panel. Can you describe what efforts the city has made to fill those vacant positions and why those efforts have not been successful?
I believe they've been reaching out, trying to recruit nurses, but again, the city's not a lucrative high paying for nurses in the area with the hospitals that we have here. So that's the main issue. I think they are also trying to revise the nurse contract as well to increase the salaries to make it more attractive for nurses to be retained and hired by the city.
Thank you for that. Any other information?
No, not this time.
Okay. This item has come before us in previous years, so colleagues are no doubt familiar with it. The queue is now open. I'm looking to see who's on the queue, starting with Alder Honda Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If we could just bring that microphone close to you. Thank you.
Can you tell us where you transferring the monies from?
It's for the salary budget line. And the amount that we're transferring lines up with the salary savings associated with having those vacancies.
So just for clarification, the salary line from the vacant positions?
Yes,
that's
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good clarification, Alder Smith. We wouldn't want to take money from the salary lines that's actually paying somebody.
Absolutely.
That would not be appropriate. Thank you, Alder Smith. Alder Furlow's next on the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Yes, we've been here before. So out of this 2.3 million, I think we've asked this before, and I just don't remember how many nurses are we looking at, and what is the projected salary?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can get it for you.
We can get that through you, Mr. Chair?
So noted.
And do we know out of the 2.3 million, what's the salary range for these nurses? Well, I guess I should ask first, is this a full day or is it rotating? How are the nurses going to be staffed? This particular agency going to be staffing the schools?
Right, this is through the agency, so they get the request from the Board of Education, from the schools. They get sent out by the agency. It's, on a rotating basis.
So when we have a nurse absent,
oh yes, the agency would send it.
Then they would
yes.
send it in, and then it could be 3 hours, it could be
right.
a week, depending on.
How that gets administered is sort of the contractor administers the schedule and who goes where and that sort of thing. We just fund the contract.
And imagine are they paid by the hour? I mean, how do we come up with the 2.3 million?
It was part of the submitted contract from the health department, which outlined, the estimates for, depending on, based on their scope of service. And so there were costs associated with that, so we came up with a contractual number that was pretty consistent I think last year it was pretty similar. They may come back for a second transfer.
Yeah, it was pretty close to last year too. And there are 10-month nurses and 12-month nurses. These are all, everyone who's on contract, I believe, is 12 months. Some of the nurse employed by the city are 10 months.
I do remember that, and I think it was just a little important to have that before the committee. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. I think in previous years, we had the director of the health department here who was able to give a little more operational detail for how the nurses are deployed, because some of them are deployed in public schools, but others are deployed at the health department headquarters where we administer vaccines and provide other services to residents. So if there are follow-up questions that colleagues have, they should send them to me, and I'll make sure that they get to our director of the health department, who I think would know more about how those folks are deployed. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, my question was actually, what is our salary based on 10-month or 12-month calendar year? You said we have both.
Yes.
So is the majority 10 months or 12
I think
months?
the
And what
majority
is
are
this?
12.
And okay, so what is done in the summer? Is it for summer camps? Is it for programs?
I think that would be better directed to the health department.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I guess through you, or
Yes.
we can
So noted.
have a list of, and does the salary change 10 months to 12 months? What are the salary differences?
I think they're around 73 or 74,000, somewhere around there, roughly.
Okay. I guess I only bring it up because if they follow the school, if the school nurses follow the school calendar, it's a pretty sweet, I don't know, position, I would think, and no overtime and weekends. But we're still having trouble finding
Yes.
nurses to fill these positions, which has been a problem for a few years now, even for our hospitals that pay much higher. Okay, well, I guess the saga goes on. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues on this item? The request to increase the contract with this firm and to provide the money for it. Seeing none, thank you both for your presentation. And we'll now see if there's anyone from the public who wishes to testify on this item. So you two are dismissed. Or is there more that you want to say? I know, but you have to make way for the public. They need these seats. But thank you.
Thank you.
You're new, you're getting it. That's your exercise, then you have to sit back down. Yes, ma'am, please come forward. And when you get settled, please give us your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm Cynthia Harris Jackson, 199 High Top Circle, West Hampton. I'm a public health nurse for the city of New Haven. I'm a 10-month nurse. I think the bigger problem with asking for that amount of money, we have a complement of 42 nurses. If we had a full complement, currently we have 16 nurses that are city employees. The other 28 are agency. They work the same schedule as we work. And if you took the 42 for the full complement that we should have and put it at the top salary of 73, which will be for the fiscal year beginning 2026, that's a cost of approximately 3.1 million. The 2.3 million that they're asking for 28 nurses, that's approximately $82,000 for the rest of this school year, not including what they were paid already. They work the same schedule we work. When they get hired, some of them are hired for 5 days. Some say I can only do 2. But every school has a nurse every day unless we're just short on nurses. I think a bigger problem is to get out in the public and petition and have job fairs, try to attract nurses. And I think the way we're going to attract nurses and retain nurses is to make our salaries competitive, especially with the inflation. And it's just the cost of living, we're not competitive anymore. We only have, we lost 28 nurses since the beginning of COVID. And instead of taking this 2.3 million to finish paying an agency, I do understand we need nurses to staff our schools. We should be out there trying to increase the pay so we can get people to come instead. The attrition rate is horrible. They're asking for 2.3 million from now to the end of the year. How much have they spent already? With the 2.3 million for now for 28 nurses from November to June, that's $82,000 per nurse. And we're just not attracting people with the salary. We did get an increase in salary but with inflation and the cost of living, we're still not competitive with our neighboring schools. And we have gotten 3 to 4 nurses to come in, they get trained. Within 2 months, they leave and go to other cities. We train them and then they go to other cities that are more competitive.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Before you leave, let's see if there are questions from colleagues. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It may not actually be a question for you, but maybe for our budget director. Is there a fee that we pay for the agency?
I could probably answer that for you, which would be yes.
And how much? And what is that fee? Because you bring up a good point regarding, we pay $73K per year, but when you do the math, this goes up to $83K per year. But then we have to subtract the agency fees that are associated with that amount as well. So I guess what are those fees?
Thank you, Alder Festa. We can follow up on that for sure.
Thank you.
But most definitely, any temporary staffing agency is going to charge fees. That's always going to be the case. But finding out what they are is something we can look into.
And that's what I was getting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Any further questions? Alder Furlow.
Just very quick, Mr. Chair, just a clarification. Haven't we recently approved the nurses' contract for the schools?
It was in the last couple of years. I can't remember exactly what, but yes.
I wonder when that contract is coming back up. Just an interesting note, without going into discussion about it, but when that will come back up, because the request will be, it's not what's being requested, just not possible through this body, if they're still under contract.
Excellent point. We can find out when that contract expires, although it is technically possible for an employer and union to negotiate even before an expiration. But that's really between them.
It's not with us.
It's not with us. But we can find out where things stand with that. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alder Furlow. Further questions from colleagues? I'm suddenly having dry throat syndrome, so I apologize if I cough into the microphone. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much for having
And
me.
thank you for the work you do
Thank
for
you.
our residents. Is there another member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? Any other members of the public wishing to testify on this item? Excuse me, and for a third time, any member of the public wishing to testify on this item, please come forward, raise your hand. Seeing none, we're going to proceed to the next 2 items. The next 2 items, as I mentioned at the outset of the meeting, thank you, sir, are listed at the end, which is not where I intended them to be. Item 6 is the June monthly, and item 5 is the year-end transfers. I think the 2 of them kind of merged together because it's really about closing out last fiscal year. What were the results of that closeout? We should hear that because it helps set the stage for the other items before us this evening.
That's out a version of the monthly report.
don't know.
And even though it has not been very long since you last came up, give us your names and addresses for the record.
Got a survey.
I'm Budget Director at 925 Roanoke Road, Waterbury, Connecticut.
Ron Gizzi, 219 Rainbow Terrace, Camden.
Please proceed.
So I present to you the pre-audit financial report. This is on a budgetary basis. The audit, when it comes out, will be on a GAAP basis, so it looks slightly different. But on a budgetary basis, we had a surplus of $16.3 million. A lot of the surplus was driven by expenditure savings. The vast majority of the positive budget variances, the variances to budget, were a lot of it was attrition. There was a lot of salary savings in the budget, which brought us, ended up going towards the surplus. The revenues came on pretty much on target. There was a slight negative variance of about $600,000. So they were projected pretty close. I mean, that's really close for a budget of this size. So the revenues came in as expected. The expenditures came in significantly below budget. On an aggregate basis for revenues, I'm just trying to find the right page. They came in.
If you find the page, please let us know which one it is.
I know Ron told me what page numbers.
Page numbers. Always have page numbers.
He warned me, I apologize for that as well. But this basically, since the revenues came in on target, the majority of the surplus was due to the salary savings. And you could see on the last page of this document, you could see, there were positive budget lines that really, the transfer, we'll talk about later, but you can see all the positives where the funds will be transferred from one fund to cover some negative variances in other funds. There's definitely positive line items here across many departments, and we do attribute that significantly to the attrition in salaries. We also had budgeted the $5.5 million in ARPA funds as revenue replacement. We did not have to use that. That we will talk about later in terms of the transfers. We did see, some positive results for things such as workers' comp came in well below budget, and there was police services had positive budgetary variances. So all in all, it was really based on the tight expenditures, maintaining good expenditure controls throughout the year. Again, people worked hard because there was a lot of attrition and a lot of vacancies, but that did result in significant savings. We don't expect to see that much in savings in the current year because our goal is to fill these vacancies. Our goal is to make sure that we have sufficient staff to do the work and to ease up some of the pressure from some really hardworking city employees. So I would attribute the vast majority of the positive results to those savings. I can go through some of the other funds as well. There was the litigation fund. As you know, we had a settlement. And if you look on this document on the first page after the cover, it does show, if you were to look at revenues over expenditures, it does show a $15 million deficit. However, funds had been transferred from the general fund balance in the prior year to cover that. So all in all, the litigation fund ended the year with a $1.78 million fund balance. The other funds all did quite well. The medical fund, workers' comp had positive, were positive to budget. So all in all, the city ended with a much higher fund balance than we had in prior years. All in, the cumulative total of the fund balance was $56.9 million. And the general fund budget was about $53.3 million before assigning, we have a proposal to assign fund balance. So it was a very positive year. It put the city in a good position, so we have enough cushion to handle any unforeseen financial issues, such as any revenue shortfalls or any pressures, fiscal pressures from the economy, anything like that. We do have a reserve cushion that will really help us through. We did get upgraded from one of the rating agencies as a result, where they saw that we are maintaining our reserve levels higher than we have in prior years. It's really been a positive trajectory. In 2018, we had negative fund balance, negative $10 million. And now we're in a position where we have, $50 million in reserves to ensure that we can have fiscal stability over the next several years. There's challenges, obviously, with the ARPA money is going to, start to dissipate and things of that nature. So, the work is constant in making sure that the budget is right-sized and that we are ensuring fiscal stability down the line.
While you're at it, do you want to just say a few words about the year-end transfer?
Sure. So the year-end transfer, there were some budget line items that did come in negative. We did use up.
While you're gathering yourself real quickly, I'll just point out to colleagues that in our packets that Don Hayden prepared for us, we have the order and the list of transfers, the items that were in surplus where the money could be taken from, and the items that were in deficit where the money could be put. It's just an important financial housekeeping that we do every year. So it's in our packets if colleagues want to refer to it. Please continue.
Yes, this last page really is a line item of what was being moved. So you can see positive, the positive balances for legislative services all the way through fair rent was all positive, and then actually all of them equals 22.577 million. And then on the transfer to side, there were negatives. A lot of those, we've used up the vacancy savings. We used sort of as a contingency item in the budget, so that came out negative by year end. We had a contract reserve that was negative. Another expenditure reserve was negative by 3 million. Debt service was negative, and a lot of that is attributed to interest rate costs for the grant anticipation note that has been outstanding. We saw really high interest rates. It's a variable rate structure, and so when the interest rates were very high, our interest payments were very high, and so we are really working hard to alleviate that. The Board of Education and the controller is doing a significant amount of work to get the state reimbursement so that we can pay down as much of that as possible to really alleviate this to have a $2.3 million negative there. We really want to ensure we don't have that moving forward.
Okay. Any further information you want to provide?
I think one of the important things, if I look on that second page, is the tax collection rate, 99.68, which is excellent. And one other thing is we're exploring increasing our interest rates on money that we haven't paid. The controller has been actively pursuing that, and she has obtained some bank interest rates that are much higher than we're getting now. So that'll definitely be a positive for us.
Thank you. All right. So the queue is now open for colleagues who have questions about the fiscal year closeout and the transfer amendment that's before us that make sure the books are properly balanced at the end of the year. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that our debt services, the rate is a variable rate. Why is that, and can that be changed to a fixed rate?
Yes, it can. That loan is going to, we need to renew it. So it's a grant anticipation note. So we're able to refinance that for a 10-year period. We are able to, it comes due May 2025, and then we would refinance that till 2027, and it has to be paid off. We're working really hard to get rid of it. Like, we would love to not have to issue it again. We probably will have to do some amount. But as we work really hard with the state to provide all of the backup information they need, they will provide us with reimbursements, and that will start allowing us to pay down that grant anticipation note. And there may be some ineligible costs, because a lot of this, the grant is for school buildings, school construction, and then there's a school construction reimbursement program. There may be some ineligible items in that, the amount of note, grant anticipation note outstanding. So those would be likely long-term financed if we see that, we're not going to get grant money for that. But we're trying to avoid all of that. We're working on a lot of initiatives to get it fully covered if we can.
Okay, and I appreciate that. It's just when you have a variable interest rate, it's hard to budget,
Yes.
especially on the public sector side.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just trying to really figure out what we're doing. So this is $3 million that we're taking from the general fund for educational purposes.
Alder Furlow, that's next.
That's next. I went and got some tea and missed something.
It's very related.
Hold that question.
I'm wondering, I said, why are we talking about that right now when we should be? Okay, I'm fine with the other issues that are what I've heard from the other presentation. Thank you. I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alder Furlow. Further questions from colleagues on closing out the last fiscal year and the transfers being requested to make sure everything is correct? Alder Festa.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification on the, I guess it would be that first page, where it says the ending fund balance is 50 million, but the surplus is 60 million. So the number that we really can work with is the 16 million.
Well, no, because the 50 million, it's in a fund right now. Like, we have that in a reserve fund.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I see ending fund balance, but that's the reserve fund.
Oh, right. So if you look at the beginning fund balance was 36,987. And then you see the surplus, and then we'll get to the assigned fund balance.
Okay.
So you see that's a negative, but we will have 50.3 when all is said and done.
50.3 in the fund.
In the general fund balance.
General fund balance.
Yes. That's a reserve fund. It's within the general fund, but it's in its own account.
Okay, and how flexible is that?
It's unassigned. It means you can use it for any purpose.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And those are unaudited right now, so just.
Yeah, when the auditors, there'll be adjustments to that number based on GAAP accounting.
Yeah, not significant, but those are.
Okay, you said not significant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's been much higher than our budgetary number in past years, so, it should be right in the ballpark.
Of 50.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues? Any further questions? I'm going to have you stay here this time.
Okay.
Because I'm not certain we're going to have testimony on this item. But let's find out.
Okay.
Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on the closeout for the last fiscal year? Anyone here wishing to testify on that or the transfer, which is good housekeeping? Any member of the public wishing to testify on these two items? And for a third time, maybe more than a third time, anyone here wishing to testify on these two items? Seeing none, we're going to proceed in our agenda to the final two items. One is a proposal to assign $3 million of this balance towards educational cost contingencies. And you'll explain more about what that is mechanically.
Yeah.
And then also a reallocation of $5.5 million in ARPA funds, which we had included in last year's budget for revenue, which we didn't need, which is being proposed to be reallocated for something else. And are you two the presenters on this? Do we have folks from the Board of Ed also presenting?
Yeah.
Because if you are, now's the time to come forward. We're going to the last two items, the 3 million and the 5.5. So we'll just give our colleagues a moment to come forward and see. And once you are seated, we'll ask you, of course, to give us your names and addresses, please. Starting over here.
Good evening. Happy to start. Dr. Madeline Negron, Superintendent of Schools, 70 Cava Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
Linda Hammond, CFO, 210 Osborne Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
Ron Gizzi, 219 Rainbow Terrace, Manhattan.
Shannon McHugh, 925 Orno Road, Buckner.
And I'm Christine Bourne, the Business Director, 17 Red Orange Road, Milton.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, so we would like to transfer or assign $3 million of the $16.36 million surplus for educational purposes. And the reason why we would like to assign it is basically we're treating it as a contingency. So one of the things that we were trying to avoid doing is adding to the Board of Education's minimum budget requirement. So there's a requirement that the Board of Education must fund, there's a minimum amount that they must fund, and it must be the same amount for education as the previous year with certain exceptions. So the reason why we are assigning it as fund balance is this is not a direct appropriation to the Board of Education. This is a contingency reserve fund that we have set aside to use for educational purposes. Education is such a priority for the city, for the mayor, and we want to ensure that we have enough funding available for any kind of shortfalls that could occur. There are some spending pressures. We want to be sure that we have those excess funds available to handle any of the spending pressures that we will see throughout the year so that the school district could function and have enough cash and reserves and everything so that they will have a successful fiscal year. So that is why we have assigned it. We did talk to our auditors about assigning the fund balance. It's essentially still sitting in an account. There's the fund balance that are separate accounts. This one there's the unassigned, this one is assigned, and it is only to be used for educational purposes.
Further comments on this? I would just note before our superintendent speaks that colleagues might have had a similar reaction to mine when I saw the amendment to appropriate ordinance 2. I said, well, where's the amendment to appropriate ordinance 1? Because where our training is that if you're adding to the revenue side of the budget, you also add to the expenditure side. Usually you do the expenditure side first and then you find the money. And that's not what this is. It's not increasing the size of the city's budget by $3 million. It is basically saying this $3 million of our surplus, of our reserve, is designated to Board of Education expenditures should the Board of Ed need it before the end of the fiscal year, right? So that's what this is. And so it doesn't then increase our budget. It doesn't then say that come next budget season, we're looking at what we gave last May +3 plus whatever additional request. But it is saying, look, Board of Ed, you don't really need to meet the budget that we have because we got this $3 million assigned that will bail you out if you're not gonna be able to. So it's like a cushion that the city would provide.
Right, but I would like to point out that, in the 2024, we had projected a larger deficit for Board of Education. However, there's lots of tools available to try to manage that expenditure, all those expenditures throughout the year. There are pressures for sure, and I won't speak to the pressures because I don't know.
They will speak to them
Yes,
shortly.
exactly. But, it's still early in the year, there's still lots of tools, lots of ways to save. And so the hope is that the $3 million could stay in a assigned fund balance, and we could keep it there, and it would, be that reserve that the Board of Education needs. But it is there, it is a contingency, and we wanted to make sure that it was available should the need arise.
Great. Please, I think you're ready.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity to come before you tonight. I just want to preface this before I also ask our Chief Financial Officer to add. But I wanted to share that again, when we presented our budget and we looked at what our expenses would be, we knew that we were going to have lots of challenges, right? We ended the year with the increase of the 2.45% increase that we did receive for this fiscal year, knowing that we were going to have to mitigate 11.8, right? And we had put forth a proposal on how we would look to mitigate that budget. That is something that we are currently doing in that mitigation, but there are significant pressure points. Again, looking at the fact that we were looking to mitigate $11.8 million. In particular, we had honed in on different categories such as cost of transportation, cost of contractual services. Those are some areas where right now we are having significant challenges. In addition, in terms of the rate of our, Linda, help me out, the indirect costs, that again, there was an increase there as well. That was also something that was not projected. So again, yes, we opened up the year, but we knew that we opened up the year in the red, knowing that we have months to mitigate it. We've been working extremely hard, but again, that is a mitigation effort that we're still working with. So having, I want to call it a lifeline, would be extremely welcome. Also knowing that we're not saying, all right, Board of Ed, you can be, don't feel the pressure that you have to continue to mitigate because you have this set aside. No, it's continuing to mitigate, but know that you have a lifeline. And I don't know if I missed anything.
If we could just move that microphone a little bit closer, thank you.
What I'm going to do now is walk you through the history and how we're coming to the issue that we have at hand. And Christine, if you can pass out those.
Sure.
Oh, we have some paper, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just take a moment to do that.
You made it to the end. Go ahead.
Please.
Okay, so as Dr. McGrone mentioned earlier, we do have a deficit, but what I wanted to do is to walk you through how we got where we are today. So I'm starting with 23-24. We had requested $207 million, and we actually were approved for 203. So at that time, we had a difference of $3.8 million deficit. What we did was, we had, thank God, we had ESSER money and a few other grants, so we were able to move stuff around, and we were able to knock that deficit down to, I think we ended up with
700,000.
700,000 rounded off, which we just could not mitigate. So then we get to 23, 24, and we asked for a budget. Our request was 220, and the difference was 16.8, which was, we were asking for 8.2% in 8.27% increase, knowing that the prior year we had a shortfall. So we ended up receiving $5 million, which was $500,000, which was a 2.4% increase. So already out the gate, we knew we had problems. So if you look at the next page, page 3, it shows where we requested 16.8. We received the mayor's first budget proposal, which was $5 million. So the amount to mitigate was $11.8 million. And I just want to point out that this was a snapshot in time, because there are certain dates that things have to be done, and we had to go to the Board of Aldermen and stuff. So this was a snapshot in time when we put the budget together. So, and we did say that we had unforeseen emergencies, continued increases for our special ed, increases in the utility costs, our aging building and repairs, and acts of nature, which are of course out of our control. So on the proposed budget mitigation plan, what we had done was we looked at where we think we could reduce the $11.2 million. And you could see where we had operations, non-instructional, transportation, other contractor services, realignment of staff, with resignations and retirements. And we also, so we came down with a 2.3, which we were still looking for. The items in blue, we highlighted those to show you that those things did not materialize. We were thinking that we could cut some bus routes and things of that nature, but because we were negotiating a contract with the bus company, you then can't go back and say, okay, and by the way, I need $1 million from you. So that did not materialize. And then we had other contractor services for which things keep going. Things are going in the wrong direction. Things keep going up. Things keep breaking. There were other things that went up. I think just regular contractor costs and the cost of doing business are starting to go up as well. And folks are saying, well, we thought that maybe we can work with those people to try to cut our costs, but they have budget mitigation and folks that they have to pay and salaries they have to pay as well. So that didn't materialize. So that's why I kind of highlighted those things in blue to show that these were two of the things that we're still trying to look for. In addition, we received a lot of ESSER money in the last 5 years, but what happened was that it severely reduced our indirect cost rate. We had an indirect cost rate of 6.25%, and that was money that we could deduct from federal grants for just the cost of doing business. What happened was that when we did the report in January to show, what our expenditures were, they were low on the general fund side because we had tons of grants coming in. What happened was that unfortunately, you cannot claim a grant as a reimbursement. So we went from 6.25%, we're down to 1.6%, which is severely going to handicap the additional money that we can get as the cost of doing business. I had a person call me today, they're looking at the number, they said, you made a mistake. I said, no. She said, are you kidding me? And I said, yeah, that's our new indirect cost rate. And that was due to all of the federal funds that came into the district that we could not claim. So that's where we are right now in terms of why we need the additional funding to have it on hold, and hopefully that we won't have to use it all, but at the rate we're going with being underfunded on the general fund side for so long, and I think I've come before this board before showing how grants basically were covering dollars for general fund, and I think I even showed you where it was almost 51% at the time that was used to cover the general fund expenditures, or to, I don't want to say cover, I should say assist with the school district and running the school district. And now we're seeing the flip side of it, that there are just no other grants out there that, while we maximize what we have, we're going in the wrong direction now because there just are not funds to assist us with all of the good things that we've had in the past. So you'll probably start seeing things happening that, like you said, we had a good day, and now it's to the point where there are going to be a lot of things that we will not be able to provide because we just don't have the additional funds. And that's my report based on this.
Before we continue, let me just recognize our colleague Alder Jeanette Morrison, who has joined us. Okay, thank you for that information. Did you want to add to that? No?
I
Yes?
didn't have much to add. I mean, I just do want to say that it's common for people to say, well, look for more grants, which we do, but that means more staff, not to supplant what we're already providing. So any additional things that we would go after would cost new programs.
Thank you. Shall we talk about the 5.5 million in ARPA funds? Do you want to just quickly frame that for us? And then the board of ed committee speak to the facility needs that these funds would somehow address.
So these funds were appropriated for the 2024 budget. It was 5.5 in revenue replacement. We ended the year with a significant surplus. The revenues came in right on budget essentially, here below. So we did quite well on the revenue side, and there was no need for us to utilize the 5.5. So we are recommending that we take this 5.5 from the ARPA funds, and then reallocate those to eligible projects, and in this case, capital projects within the Board of Education, the public schools, to fund some of the facility needs. Again, I won't speak to those. I'll let the do that. But these funds are available. They will be utilized for a purpose that is well within the parameters of how they should be, can be used under ARPA, and we recommend moving those funds over for the capital.
Thank you. That's a fairly straightforward explanation, but perhaps you could give some more information about why you think this money would be so needed.
So as it relates to the 5.5 million for capital, I think for quite a while, right, we've been hearing about the dire situation that we're in as it relates to all of our school facilities. The 5.5 will be a way to look at the extensive list of projects that we have had that we haven't been able to fully fund. Part of that process would be to begin with the health and safety pieces first. So like, for example, looking at work that we can do around HVAC, seizing the opportunities of 2 grants that we recently received from the state, where we did get them, and we have them until 2026, in particular for Edgewood and for Lincoln Bassett. But the way that it works, right, we have to upfront the money, do all the repairs, and then we can get reimbursement. So we did apply for them because we're being proactive, but the reality is that we don't have the dollars, for example, to execute on that. If we were to get these dollars immediately, right, that would jump on our priority list so that we could take care of those things. In addition, continue to do all the mold situations that have to be addressed throughout the district, as well as other things that we keep hearing about, like all the repairs related to our bathrooms and situations like that. So again, it's taking the scope of the magnitude of everything and seizing opportunities to chip away at it with an additional $5.5 million.
If I could just add,
Please.
this would be a great opportunity, because what it will do is, while we're doing a lot of work with the HVAC systems on the grants, the state is only going to reimburse us 77 point, I think it's 3%. So the additional funds that we would get would make up the difference. And again, like as Dr. Negron mentioned, we have to upfront the money and then they will reimburse us. But again, it's at a percentage of 77 point, I want to say 3 or 4.
Any further information any of you would like to give us? Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll just remark briefly that, at the outset of this exchange, I made kind of a challenging statement about the money because I wanted to provoke a response, which you did respond. Obviously, all of us here see the public schools as being really, really important and the condition of the schools being really, really important, but it was important to understand exactly what's being proposed. What does it mean? What are the implications now and later with what's being proposed, and what would the money be used for? So thank you for that information. We'll now have questions from colleagues on these two items. I'm taking a list of colleagues. In one moment. Furlough on the queue. Alder Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I clearly understand that when we got all these new schools, we didn't really have a plan to keep up the maintenance. So I understand about why it would be important to change over the amount of money to capital, but what is your plan beyond that $5.5 million?
So with the capital dollars that we do have, we are prioritizing around most urgent, as I mentioned, as it relates to health and safety. So we're going to continue to do that. But besides that is continuing to advocate at the state level with the advocacy we're going to be putting together a whole 10-year capital plan that really speaks about how we should approach the work in phases. So that we have an idea, right? Where is it that we want to get, inclusive of the preventative measures that need to come in, so that we have clarity as to the scope of the need and how we can get there in 10 years, because we know we're not going to be able to get there overnight.
That we will be starting the capital budget. And there is, if you look at the 5-year capital budget, there is an allocation for the Board of Education, and we will be evaluating projects that we will bond out for. And that's coming up very soon. We're starting that process now.
Correct, because this year there was no capital bonding, but next year there will.
Yes.
Alder Walker.
Thank you. Well, before I say thank you, Mr. Chair, I always think that it's really important to correct the mistakes that we made in the past. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to be thinking about a 10-year plan, because I think that's really, really important, because I can understand how we got so far behind as far as the capital and keeping our school buildings up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Honda Smith, followed by Alder Ferraro-Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk in regards to the $3 million on education transfer. What will you be using the $3 million for?
Basically to cover our salary.
Let's make sure that microphone is close.
When we are going to get it right. Okay, basically we'll be using that to cover our projected deficits within the personnel costs, because we still have contracts that still have to be negotiated. And we did a right sizing project where we moved staff around to where they were most needed. We looked at every single school. We did a funding the gap analysis to show where the teachers are needed and what is needed. And so now what we're basically doing is that we're looking at, okay, fine, like the teacher, like say if you had a teacher that left at 60, and then you had a new hire. So now that teacher maybe came in at 75 or 95, where there's a gap there. So what we have to do now is try to plug those dollars into where we are still short. And I think we were looking at 4.2. So that's what we would most likely do. We're going to try to go to the biggest pot where we know we still have shortfalls.
So with clarification, so I can understand what you're doing. It's not to elevate the current teachers' salaries?
We've already done that.
Okay.
The teacher's contract has already been ratified and negotiated, and so, those were some big differences. So now we have to look at what was the number before, because I need to emphasize too that when we put our budget together, we start in November. So we freeze our databases and stuff, and then we start working on numbers and stuff so that we could be ready for the board in April and May to pass the budget. So what happens that a lot of things have changed since then, since we put the first budget together. So now we're re-looking at our numbers and see, okay, fine. If Linda left at 50 and Susie came in at 60, that's $10,000 difference. So that's what we're doing person by person. We finished that project the other day, and now we're looking at what the difference is.
Thank you. My next question, which will be my final question, hopefully. We're talking about the 5.5 mil in the ARPA funding. How would you utilize that for the schools that are currently closed for the HVAC system? Will you be getting those schools back up to par?
No, the ones that are closed, right now, there's no plan for us to bring those back up. Right now, we're going through a whole analysis, because we know, right, to think about how we can be sustainable in the future. We know that we're not gonna be able to continue to hold on to those facilities. What we are doing is I want to make sure that we are very thoughtful in looking at the projections, again, in the future, to say, I don't want to release them to the city, and then 10 years down the line, be like, oh my God, enrollment went up, we didn't consider that, and now all of a sudden I have no space. So that's what the second phase of our analysis would allow us to do. We have probably a good number already that I'm pretty confident that I can say we can let go of those. So that's probably going to be something that you're going to be hearing about fairly soon, because we're getting ready to have those conversations with the city to say, these are the ones that we're going to release over to the city, and then show a whole process, right, on what will happen after we do our part of just releasing them.
Being that you brought that up, have you ever thought about bringing back the neighborhood schools? If you decide to release that, there wouldn't be no schools in the neighborhoods for the kids to attend.
So I think the piece that we're looking at now is in terms of the enrollment, in the projected enrollment in the different areas, taking also into consideration the status of our mechanical systems in all of our buildings, is then being able to determine which of the current facilities right now are worth investing on, because there's still life to them. And I think that's what we have to consider. So much of what we have to consider is on the facility side, because it wouldn't make sense to invest in something that we know it's already like, those systems no longer, you can bring them back up because you can't even find parts. They no longer exist. So it would be like investing in something that would really be like money that you are wasting because it doesn't have a plan for the future. So a lot of the emphasis again is what systems again still have a lot of life to them that we should be investing on, and then also looking at our enrollment or patterns so that we can do those things.
My last question, Mr. Chair. You talked about investing into to make sure that the maintenance and everything is up. We're investing into long-term by having experienced people to be able to do the maintenance work instead of putting everything out contractual.
I also know that a lot of the conversation that we've been having, it's about how can we bring a lot of the work that we currently outsource to come in-house. So that is, I am very grateful for Michael Carter, who has been supporting me and the district with that work to make sure that there is a thorough research behind it to say, hey, yes, we want to move in this direction. This will be the cost of going in that direction. So then we can backwards plan on how it is that we can get there. So that analysis is what he has been really spending a lot of significant time on, as well as doing the day-to-day leading around our facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Alder Farrar Santana, followed by Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation.
Let's make sure that microphone is close enough.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and thank you. I'm still a little confused because you talk about capital projects from the American Rescue Plan. I sit on the Capital Projects Committee. We didn't have one this year, but we had one the year before. And there was a lot of emphasis put on the Board of Education on the capital projects, doing a lot of reinvention of the HVAC systems and upgrading them in your capital budget. So, and using some of the ARPA funds, I believe, was also to be utilized. So what happened to that money? And where does that stand?
Some of those projects were able to be done in terms of the ARPA dollars. So some of those did happen, some have not. I do not have all the specifics, but I'm happy to ask so that we can share those, as I don't have those. But a lot of investing was done with the ARPA money to HVAC. But again, we are nowhere where we need to be with all of our buildings because there was so much that needed to happen and the dollars just didn't extend to everything that needed to be addressed.
Thank you. Through the chair, can we request that list?
So noted.
Thank you. My next question is, I lost my train of thought about the 5.5 million. Oh, also, I noted that, I did make a note to myself. There was a question on the 5.5 million capital funds, the money that you want to use for capital funds expenditures, is what are the list of the projects and what can you continue to do from the last list to this list that you're saying that you need the money for? So can we get an additional list of those projects that you plan on doing with that money?
Yes.
Or is it a continuation of what you didn't do?
No, so again, that's what I had asked Michael Carter to assist me with, to take a look again, everything that was in the docket, things that were not even considered, now that he has had time to go and assess, to then prioritize and to say, if we were to get this 5.5, I want to make sure that we can clearly communicate, this is where the 5.5 is going, right? We can hit this particular project. Just like the example that I gave you with those two particular HVAC systems, Edgewood and Lincoln Bassett, that I know I want at the top of the list, because that way we can, get some of that money reimbursed.
Okay.
I take that from your questioning that we should not only receive information about recent expenditures for facilities repair and maintenance, but planned future investments that these funds would cover.
Actually, it's
Happy to follow up on that.
Yeah, the capital budgets and what they had indicated in the capital budgets and which ones were accomplished in that. And what are these dollars going to be in the future to use this money
We'll
for?
definitely follow up on that.
And trying to think of something else. So my next question is the 5.5 million ARPA funds was this designated to like school projects? I mean, not talking about HVAC. Are we moving, maybe the chair can explain it to me. Are we moving funds from our general fund or from their general fund? That's confusing to me.
The 5.5 million that we're discussing now was money that we had voted as revenue for last fiscal year's budget.
Okay.
But because of the $16 million surplus, that 5.5 million in ARPA funds wasn't used because it wasn't needed. So then that's kind of like ARPA money that's out there that's allocated for something and it wasn't used. So we know that if we don't use it for
Yes.
something, it's gonna go back to the
Okay.
feds. So what should it go towards? Because we didn't use it. So the administration is proposing to use it for school maintenance.
Thank you very much for that clarification, because that's what I was a little bit confused on, because I didn't understand. I thought it was actual money that was in your budget.
No.
It's in our budget. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I'm all set. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Alder Santan. Alder Furlow's next, followed by Alder Festa.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I think we're all frustrated. I'm frustrated. I feel like we woke up one day and said, our schools are broke. And I know that we just don't have money to do the repairs that were necessary. And so I'm going to ask, just first, let's deal with the money that's being used. It says here that is for enhancing academic performance, supporting mental health initiatives, and ensuring the retention of essential educators and staff to create a more effective and supportive learning environment. But I think what I would like to ask first is to our staff is what would qualify the release of these funds? Is it at the end of the year? How is this going to be budgeted or released? I mean, so it's going to be transferred, it's going to be sitting in a pot. How do they get it?
Are you talking about the 3 million or the 5.5?
Yeah. Yes, I'm doing the 3 million.
3 million.
Yep, that's for the.
I thought you were the 3 million it's in a fund. It's considered, general fund balance. It's separated from, the expenditures. So it's a reserve fund. It's a reserve fund that can be drawn upon when the need arises.
But they're already in the negative, so that's why I'm just.
But they were, I hear what
Right.
you're saying. Last year, they were also in the negative by 3.2 million, and the education budget line item came in at 700,000, like around 700,000 in deficit. So you can see, like, there's a lot of moves and a lot of tight budgeting and controls that the Board of Education utilizes. So we don't know exactly how much the deficit will be by year end. We do know there's pressure. I mean, it's very likely they're gonna need to use these funds, and these funds will be available. But in the instance that we don't need to draw all of it, those will sit in a reserve fund for future use.
So I think more specifically, I'm asking what the criteria would be. So they're running a deficit, so then your office would say, these are the things you have to do in order for us to be able to release these funds, perhaps. So you have to apply for this grant, you have to jump through this hoop, dance on one foot, and then we'll give you the funds.
There's no, we're the ones who are assigning it, right? There's no legal hoops or anything like that we have to jump through. It's a matter of coming in front of Board of Alders and saying, we need to use this for this purpose. It's essentially free and clear money. I mean, the fund balance, we don't have any restricted fund balance. That's when it gets like a little bit more, you have more controls, and you have to, put more processes in place to access this. This is just assigning it, where the city is committing $3 million to help offset the pressure that they're going through right now. And as this plan, you showed, they did have a plan here, there was an $11 million hole, and they're trying to plug in with these various items. And the pressure is real. I mean, this was a plan that they're trying to implement. There's still, even if you look at this, there's still like 2.3 million down here in continued mitigation need. So those funds, we just wanted to be sure that we had those funds set aside in case this number is real and actual, or if it grows a little bit. We wanted to make sure that we had that set aside as a contingency.
Just seems like year after year, the Board of Ed has been short, has had an extreme lack of budget downfall, And so I was wondering whether, and I know it's unrestricted, so I'm probably not asking it correctly, to an accounting mind, right?
Right, right.
And so what I'm really just wondering is, do you have a policy? Or is this is just funds that would just, they say, okay, we didn't make it, we need it, and so then they just get it. There's not any policy around it, it just sits in a pot, and then at the end of the fiscal year, or whenever this is gonna be from this pot, then they say we need the 3 million, because we've had X amount of programs, teacher retention, this is what we needed, and then it's just given to them. Is that layman's terms is what I'm?
Well, I believe it would have to come in front of the board. of
There would
Aldermen.
have to be a transfer
Yeah,
that we would have to approve.
and the reason why.
Based on when you close out a fiscal year, you have to account for all the money that goes into a budget. So this money is being assigned, but it's not being added to the budget. It wouldn't be added to the budget unless it were actually needed, but then there would have to be a transfer.
And I think my only concern with this is that there's not any real criteria around it. And so it's just based on what the Board of Ed says, and then eventually it'll come back to us and based on what we feel or what we think should be done. Okay, I won't belabor that, but.
No, I hear it. And I do think, you know, this past year was a good example of, you know, facing a $3.2 million deficit and, you know, really controlling things and doing what was necessary to really bring that down. And I think our hope is that will happen again to some extent, but realizing that the pressures are real. And then also we didn't want to add to the minimum budget requirement like we did. If we just did a full allocation, then that would feed into the formula for funding, you know.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah, so that was part of it, and especially, you know, knowing that there's a solid chance that the number could come down. But if it doesn't, we have it. We have that set aside.
And I'm in no way saying that the Board of Ed does not deserve this money or need the money.
Right.
At all. Because we know the condition, we know teachers are leaving, and we're just in a very serious situation that to many of us is just very frustrating. What do we do? And so with the 5.5 million, I think that was already answered, Mr. Chair, through you, that if we were able to get at least an outline of where this 5.5 will be allocated to schools, because I think we've already approved, what, $500,000 already going to HVAC, is that?
Yeah.
Something like that. We've had somebody already go in there, and I think that was just for 10 to 12 schools, if I remember right, and there's other schools that may need this. And so it'll be helpful, just reiterating, Mr. Chair, that if we were to get that list, then I would feel much more comfortable than voting yes on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We will
Thank you.
definitely follow up. Thank you, Alder Furlow. Alder Festa is next on the queue. And I'm looking to see if any other colleagues have their hands up wishing to be on the queue.
Thank you, Mr.
Alder
Chair.
Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm going to preface this by saying that education is important to all of us. You know, public school mom here. But aside from that, you know, I feel the frustration that Alder Furlow just voiced, and I'm a little confused about this 3 million because Alder Smith asked a question of where it's going to be allocated, and there was an answer, but prior to that, I thought it was just a cushion. So which is it?
Right now,
Right? I mean, it was going towards salaries but initially it said it was going to be a cushion in case we needed it. So which is it? Where's this?
So I think I appreciate your question. The best way that I can describe it is that when you look at the pattern, and I think that's what Ms. Hannes was attempting to do in going back in history to provide numbers, is that every year a budget is being put together in talking about the projected cost of our staffing, or transportation, special ed costs, and everything else. And the budget that is put forward has never been able to be realized because we're always starting a year already operating in the negative. So that negative continues to roll year after year. I think we do a really, I'm only gonna speak for the time that I've been here. do a really good job in looking at everything to seize the opportunities to save dollars to mitigate that shortage, the amount that we're in the red. But right now, as you hear us say, right, we knew we needed 11.8 more when we projected how much do we have to pay based on the raises that were, and rightfully so, that were awarded to our, teacher contract, right, the year before, along with all the costs. In that projection, we already know when we open our doors every year, we're in the negative. So when it's prefaced as a cushion, right, at the end of the day, it's probably come back to mitigate whatever dollars it is that we can close in terms of how we start always chasing a negative number from the very beginning. That again, it's not even, our budgets are not cushioned. Our budgets are just paying out the cost of our staffing with departments, again, that are very slim. The right sizing this year that pulled away bodies from some schools to give to others. And not even costing out like the cost of inflation. We don't even build that into our budgets. I hope that explains it. I'm chasing the negative. So when we get the cushion is going to go back to pay for those line items that are going to remain in the negative. And often when you hear Linda Hannon say staffing, is because when you look at the majority of our budget, 85%, about 85%, if not more, goes to that line that most likely always ends up in the negative. So the cushion would go close that hole, which most likely is going to be, that's probably a given area that probably will come in the negative, as well as others.
So it's not really a cushion, because it's going somewhere.
I don't see it as a cushion.
This is what I'm trying to.
I'm glad you're saying that.
Let me explain myself, okay? Because I heard it was a cushion in case we need it, and it's being, allotted, but it sounds like it's going towards something. And that's what we need to clarify here, because 3 million is 3 million. Yes, it's in the general fund and it's this surplus, but I'm also thinking of residents that their mill rate went up. I'm thinking of residents that want new sidewalks, street paves, speed humps, delineators, all of this other stuff that we could be using this money towards as well. With that being said, I understand the challenges that the Board of Ed is facing, but we're the fiscal body of this city, and you also have a board that is supposed to negotiate contracts and make sure that the money that is allotted to the Board of Ed is spent in, a fashion that is conducive to that budget, just like we have to balance a budget at the end of the year. The Board of Ed does too, except it passes even with a deficit, but that's another conversation.
So let me just interject by saying that I've certainly given some latitude to colleagues to express opinions, but I want to tighten it up now to make sure we're asking questions. So I think you were moving towards a question.
Yes.
Well, we'll get there now.
Well, but I don't remember it now.
Well,
So anyway, it's just, to me, it's not a cushion as much as it's being described as a cushion. And, I guess my question is, this 3 million that is being asked for, if they spend X amount and need it, they still have to come back to the board?
Yes.
Okay, I just want that clarification. Thank you. The other thing regarding the 5.5 million, again, I guess I'm looking, Mr. Chair, maybe through you, we could get a line item ESSER expenditure that was used by the Board of Ed. Because they were, just like the city was allotted ARPA funds, Board of Ed had ESSER funds. Where was that money spent? And maybe even on programs that worked and didn't work, where that money went, because we also, I think some ESSER funds went towards programs.
So what I will do, Alder Festa, and we've heard requests from other colleagues as well, to understand the context of recent expenditures by the district on the physical plant, to understand capital and other spending that has gone into the maintenance and repair of our schools, so we can see what's been done recently. And then, of course, I will be glad to follow up on the district's more detailed plans for what this $5.5 million would go toward. We've already heard Edgewood, we already heard King Robinson, I think, but Lincoln Bassett, sorry, not too far down the road. So we should, I will follow up on that and make sure we get that information. If we're just talking about the 5.5, it's really about school maintenance and repair, and that's the scope of the follow-up that I will do. I'm not gonna ask for every dollar they spend on everything, because that's beyond the scope of this particular item, which relates to the reallocation of ARPA funds to be invested in school maintenance and repair. So I will follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, can we also, I was trying to look it up, but I looked up the wrong budget as to what was allotted in the capital budget 2 years ago.
Yes, we have that information.
Yes.
It's just a question of getting.
Oh,
I mean, we passed, it's the capital budgets are reported in our monthly financial report. It's just a question of putting it together in a convenient format so that we can also.
But the budget that's published does show $15.1 million for 2026.
So we'll gather together that information so we can have
and where that 15.
Well.
Sorry.
15.
And does that include the cafeteria and the IT that doesn't relate to school budgets?
So let's figure that out
Yeah.
offline.
Sorry. I was trying to.
But I just want to, I think there's been a request about the context, and I'm on it. So that's done. What's your question?
Yes, thank you, because we do a lot. In our capital budget, there is
You're
money
explaining a request I've already agreed
Yes,
to
no,
make.
I'm.
Please move on to your question.
I am. If you allow me to speak, Mr. Chair, I'd appreciate it. We do have a capital budget that goes towards the Board of Ed, so it's not like we're not giving money for facilities, but we have a facilities management also that gets money. Where is that funding going? Where, why are our buildings dilapidated to the point where,
okay.
I'm sorry, I am getting to the point. The point is we have money.
Chair, tell you to be quiet, you be quiet.
Stop. We're going over the same ground over and over again. We will follow up with the city staff and the district staff about the money that's been allocated through the capital budget process and through the ARPA process and what's proposed here, to see how the money's being spent. We've already had a question about who's being engaged to effect these repairs. We heard from the district that the goal is to have more of that insourced. We would like to know more about that. So those questions have been asked. We will follow up on that.
Yes, and I appreciate it, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, that I get passionate with some of this stuff, because there are schools that are under distress.
Indeed.
To say the least. So my apologies. Okay, and and the 5.5 million, you're going to get to us what it's going to be spent on, and I know there are schools. Now, during the budget season, there was mention of taking a closer look at the schools and seeing which schools were under enrolled, and possibly having conversations about how to address those schools. Has any of that been discussed?
In fact, our superintendent mentioned just a few moments ago that study is being taken on. Mike Carter is very involved in it, and that we should expect to hear back soon about what that analysis is. Is that correct?
Correct.
When do you think that would come to this point?
I don't have a set date, but I know that the structure that we're utilizing is that we bring these matters to FNO, and then from there we go over to
Finance and operations?
Finance and operations,
Okay.
and then to our Board of Education, and then often engaging here with the Board of Education on the other side, we bring that information over as well. So I will continue to use that pattern, but I don't have a set date. I know that a lot of it we need, because it has to inform our request for bond monies up at the state.
Yes, and the request for bond monies next budget year. So I would think sooner rather than later
Yes.
would be good.
And just lastly, Mr. Chair, the HVAC, I know we set money aside for HVAC, but there's also grants that are available through the state. And I think you mentioned that you did get some funding. These are grants that we could continuously apply towards. Are we doing that?
Yes, we have, and like I think I mentioned earlier that we're working on one now. I think it's due Friday. And what they're doing is that we put the projects together, but again, we're only going to be reimbursed the 77%, and all the rest would have to come from the city. And of course, we have to upfront the money, and then they pay us after we submit receipts, and they audit, and they look at what we said we were going to do, and we have to show the projects what we did against what we were supposed to do. So we have to make sure that everything is in line.
So who pays that 77%?
The state.
The state pays us back, but we, the city or the Board of Ed, has to pay it in advance.
Well, the Board of Ed would charge it to our budget, wherever their, funds are, not that they're available, but we would have to pay for the invoices and then submit the copy of the, would you believe in this day and age, canceled checks and everything, and then they reimburse us back the difference.
Okay, and I was asking that because is it us in the city side or the Board of Ed side? So it sounds like the Board of Ed side. And then you'll just replenish those funds that you spend. Correct. Once the grant is.
Correct. But what it does, unfortunately, it hinders our ability to move forward because you're using money that is going to maybe be replenished, but you can't move ahead with other things because your money is tied up waiting for reimbursement.
Right. Yeah. But at least it's money you're getting back.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Walker-Myers.
I will yield, Mr. Chair, because I left and I don't want to ask the question that was already asked.
Okay. Further questions from colleagues on these two items, the $3 million assignment of surplus funds in our general fund balance account and the $5.5 million reallocation of ARPA funds from leftover from last year.
Oh, I have a question.
Alder for our Santana. Let's get the microphone back to you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I guess my question is that over on the $3 million, and I think it was discussed with Alder Furlow. In addition, it was discussed with Alder Hunter Smith, and I'm questioning it only because in the letter, it says that we are doing it to enhance the academic performance, supporting health initiatives, and ensuring retention of essential educators. But when Honda asked the question, Alder Smith asked the question, you said that it was going to be used for projected deficits, right-sizing, GAP analysis, and not elevating teachers' salaries. So I'm confused.
I think the write-up that you have there, again, is we're bringing back a lot of our priorities inside of our strategic operating plan. And again, the budget that we have and that we created and submitted last year was in support of those things that are inside of our strategic operating plan. For us to deliver on those things, we need our budget. So when the deficit happens, again, deficit that goes to support all the things that are in strategic operating plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Alder for our
I
Santana?
am, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from colleagues on these two items, the $3 million and $5.5 million? Seeing none, we thank you for your presentation and for answering our questions. We're now going to hear from the public on these two items. So,
Thank you for the opportunity and for your support.
thank you. And so now we have the long-awaited public hearing on these two items. We didn't pass out a sign-up sheet, so we're going to ask for people to raise their hands, and I will do my best to call on people, and everybody will have their turn. I want to remind folks that we have a 3-minute time limit for public testimony, and so let's see who raises their hand. So let's start with the blue sweatshirt that has the word Thrive on it. I'm not wearing mine. Well, I don't, my glasses don't help from distance. So I may recognize you once you get in. And I just want to remind people that because we didn't pass out a sign-up sheet, of course, when you come, you'll give us your name and address for the record, and then when you leave, you'll check in with Dawn here to make sure that we have the correct spelling.
My name is Melody Gallagher. I am a resident at 32 Barnett Street, apartment D21, a teacher at Wilbur Cross, a resident of Ward 25. And I didn't prepare anything to say, I guess off the top of my head, I first want to say thank you for considering this. I know it's a big ask of the Alders. And as a resident who has been attempting to afford a house in this city for the last gazillion years, I'm still not there yet. I can empathize with the cost share that comes along with being asked of our residents. I can speak to my school across, and Alder Furlow, you had brought up, hearing about facilities issues now. From my own standpoint, I can say I'm at my breaking point. And I helped organize our school to speak at our Board of Education. I know that there's members here, Alder Festa in particular, who have worked on funding for our schools in terms of, the facilities that we share with the city, of which our students and families are cleaning on the weekends so that they can play on that track in that field. And that was just as of 2 weeks ago. So I will say that I think these funds will come to good use. But I also think that we're kind of looking at this on a through a microscope, and we're thinking of this only as a city, and that makes sense because we're here in front of you as the Board of Alders. But I think a big part of this is the funding that has not been provided from the state. And I think some other people will speak more to that, but we have not been allocated all the funds that we should have been allocated over the X amount of years. And we really need to be working on that together. So I'm hoping that moving forward, that's something that we all can do. I don't plan on leaving the city ever as a resident or as a teacher, but I will tell you it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I think you know that too, because you wouldn't be volunteering your time as Alders either if you didn't care. So I think we're all on the same page in that regard. I will say that at Cross, and this is again just speaking from my own personal opinion, I think the major issues that could be addressed under some of this funding is things with the HVAC and the roof leaks. I think that coming in and repairing the secondary issues from roof leaks might look nice when they eventually get fixed, but when those roofs continue to leak, they probably still persist. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from colleagues? Thank you so much for testimony and for teaching in our public schools. And yes, Ms. Heiklis, please come forward.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Heiklis Williams. I live at 84 Stanley Street in New Haven, Connecticut. Been living here for over 20 years. Have my children went through New Haven Public Schools from pre-K through high school, did well, and I'm not only a staff working at the New Haven Public Schools, but I'm a parent who is dedicated to see other students succeed. And I just want to thank you all for taking your time so late at night, because usually, I'm getting ready for bed and you guys are still here working this. So I wanted to thank you guys for taking the time off to investigate this matter and to dig into everything that's happening in the New Haven Public Schools in terms of these funding. And I want to urge you to pass this funding for the New Haven Public Schools, because we are in need, not just, we don't want this money just to sit somewhere. We are in need of this money. This school is run by staff who are underfunded, and a lot of staff, because sometimes we could talk about just teachers. I am the president for the paraeducators group, and they're underpaid. They're custodians, they're cafeteria workers, there's administrative assistants, and there are other staff that works to make the security, everybody that works to make the school function. And when we don't get enough funding, the students are the one who suffer. Adults can take care of themselves, but the students in the long run are the one who are going to suffer the consequences of underfunding. The schools have been underfunded for years and years, as long as I know, have always been underfunded. And we have to make a good effort from New Haven, the state, to ensure that the state gives enough funding for us to be able to educate our children the best way possible. Dr. Negron has been doing a fantastic job, but what is happening is that in her doing this fantastic job, right sizing, there are people who are leaving, there are people who are burnt out, there are people who are overworked, underpaid. I'm sorry, yes. There's people overworked, underpaid, and we need to ensure that staff are feeling good about coming to work, being paid the right salary, and the students have enough staff to service them, because that's one of the things, the shortage. We are short of staff, very short of staff. And that is something that you guys may want to take a look at, to see the staffing, if it's enough for the students. We have done that. We've gone through the process of retention, and to see how much staff would it take to run the school, and it's way more than we have. So that is something that these funds will help with staffing. And the $5 million, forget it. We just, with those buildings, there were not proper oversight, and there was not proper accountability, and now we're in this process of all the leaky roofs and all the mold and everything, so we need to fix it, because we didn't do what we're supposed to do in the first place. Thank you, guys.
Before you leave,
Yeah.
any questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good evening. May I have an address for the record?
Hi, my name is Walid Ahmed, and I live on 448 Fountain Street, New Haven. I am currently a student at Southern. I'm getting my master's in teaching. I spent some time in New Haven Public Schools, and I've seen the dire need for more resources, more funding. The class sizes are too big. The students, especially right now with so many bilingual students, students with special needs, they're struggling, and we're not providing them with the resources that they need. And it's a tragedy, because we see this huge discrepancy in our state, in our country, between wealthy districts and inner city schools that are continually underfunded. And we're really leaving our students behind. And the teachers are so hardworking, the teachers and staff are so hardworking, and they're dedicated to their students. And I have so much respect for them, but they need our help. And yeah, it's so important that we fully fund our schools. And I know there are concerns about how this money will be used. And it really, I think, highlights the fact that we need the community's voice and the teacher's voice to be included in these discussions and in these decisions. So, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Before you run off, let me just see if there's any questions from colleagues. Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. The queue is open. I see folks raising their hands, please. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Wingate, and my address is 1500 Augusta Boulevard, New Haven, Connecticut. So just listening to everything that is going on, just in the state that we're in right now for education and where our students are, although I understand that there are a lot of pressure points for people to meet what they need to meet for budgets to go through, I feel like I don't hear enough conversation around the students of today. And I feel like as much as we do advocate for our students for tomorrow, we have to remember that the community thrives from schools being opened. The community thrives from a place for students to go, not just for education purposes, for also recreational purposes. And I want to stress the importance of why the funds need to be given to schools, because it's not just from education, it's also for facilities. We talked about the policing budget earlier tonight, and I'll touch on that briefly because when those kids don't have a place to go, they're being policed. They're outside, they're doing things, probably getting into trouble, doing things they don't have no business to go, or don't have a place to go to get that energy or put their efforts into something else to do. Thankfully, the city always does a good job of trying to push the narrative forward for students, kids, families alike, but I also feel like there's more to do. And when I hear that there's $3.3 million in funds to possibly do multiple things, I think that there needs to be an accountability given to where that money goes once it's given. So if you need facilities, fix the facilities. If you need money for teachers, give it towards teachers, but it needs to be a clear indication of where it's going, because I don't hear that. I hear, hey, we have money and this is where I'm gonna put it, but no, where is it going? Is it going to the students? Is it going to the teachers? Is it going to the communities, the families that you then service? What does that look like? And how can we make sure that there's a clear plan for that to be indicated and for people to be held accountable for said funds? In addition to that, I feel as though New Haven, like I said, always does a great job of doing what needs to be done. I believe in the city. I believe in our teachers. I believe in our Board of Education. I just feel like accountability needs to be had in real time. Thank you.
But before you go, any questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And please check in with our staff about your spelling of your name. Queue's open, Mr. Stasiak, and then Ms. Blatko. Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, my name is Steve Stasiak. I live at 61 Elmwood Road. I am an English and social studies teacher at Metropolitan Business Academy, where I've worked for 14 years. I'm also a lead, instructional lead there. I want to say thank you to the Finance Committee for bringing us to this point where we are talking about a budget surplus. Our city has more than what it needs. I want to say thank you to the superintendent and her administration for the careful oversight that she's given to our schools. I know that at Metropolitan, we feel like we're very well attended to, and I'm sure that we can, speaking for a lot of my colleagues at our other schools as well. As an Edgewood Schools parent, when it comes to the $5.5 million, I'm sure that all of the families at Edgewood and at Lincoln Bassett would say, please invest in our schools to give our children safe and healthy air to breathe. That's very important. When it comes to the $3.3 million to cover possible deficits that we may find, I want to share a brief anecdote. Last year, I went through a ARC program to get my school library media specialist certification. That is a shortage area in the state. We have 11 schools that do not have full-time library media specialists, and so therefore those the libraries are not open to the children. I had to visit other schools around the state as part of my field work, and I wish that I could adequately describe the look on my fellow cohort members' faces when they heard that we have openings in New Haven, because it is not standard practice across the state to have closed libraries. In fact, it is standard practice to have one or more library media specialists and a para to do that work, to not only make sure that students are there to check out books, but to make sure that the library media specialist is there to support the teachers. This is an issue of supporting our young people, but also an issue of retainment of our staff. That is one small example. And so if we have the opportunity to make use of these funds, I'm going to ask that we please do that. Our schools, we can't do with any less than what we have right now. And our children, our young people, they deserve so, so much more.
Thank you. Questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much. And if you could write down your name for our staff, that'd be great. I think I saw Ms. Blateau next, and the queue is open after her. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Blateau. I live at 410 Greenwich Avenue in New Haven, and I'm happy to be here. Just want to note for the record, I recognize you all put in the overtime tonight. Earlier this evening, there were at least 11 NHFT members, at least 17 of our union and community colleagues here who are in support of the mayor's budget request to move $3 million from the budget surplus to address our deficit and ensure current staffing levels, and to move $5.5 million of ARPA funds to the NHBS capital improvements budget. So there was a significant crowd here, and they left before they are speaking. So just want to highlight the context that there is significant divestment in public education across the state of Connecticut. It's a cause of serious concern for all of us. As a result of the underfunded educational cost share formula at the state level, New Haven has lost out on $87.9 million since 2019. In addition, state funding hasn't kept up with inflation. So in real dollars, that means a reduction per student of $400 per student by the state since 2017. So, and that's not a cost control, that's pushing the cost onto us at the local level. And I want to applaud the mayor, superintendent, the finance committee, hopefully the board of alders for recognizing that you have to address where the state is not meeting the need. For example, you asked Alder Festa about is the state going to do more for HVAC grants? As a matter of fact, I got notice from the Department of Administrative Services that due to budget constraints at the state level, there will be no more HVAC grant funding. So Edgewood and Lincoln Bassett, we got those as a testament to the central office team's work. And now the state is saying that there's no more money for that. Meanwhile, $4 billion in the rainy day fund at the state. So we need to work together at the state level to make sure that those funds are stopping blocked and actually can move to our communities where we need them. Let's couple this with the reality that New Haven has a limited property tax base. And we know that this continues to be encroached on by Yale University, who also are generating a great amount of revenue through their endowment. And we know we need revenue for our schools and our students. So again, I want to thank the mayor, this board, our central office team for drawing attention to it so that we can deliver a world-class education for our students. That means lower class sizes, safe, welcoming, well-maintained schools, before and after school programs, the list goes on, more staffing, I could go on and on, you already know what we need. I also want to highlight, so we know we need more funding, we also need to make sure that NHPS is spending these funds in a way that meets the needs of students and schools. So we think there should be a labor community management task force to convene to determine how that $5.5 million should be spent. We need oversight, transparency, and accountability in collaboration with you, Board of Ed, and the central office team so that those funds make it to the repairs that we know are so desperately needed. Lastly, we know this, workers across the state deserve good union jobs. This investment can potentially lead to more of that, which is something I think we can all get behind. Thank you. Appreciate the time, and I have some written notes here that you can share with your committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from colleagues? Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony. We'll make sure colleagues get these. And don't forget, is that a hand over there? It's a stretch. It's a stretch. We're going to take a stretch here in a moment as well. Anyone else wishing to testify on either of these two items, the $3 million and the 5.5 in ARPA funds? Any further comments from members of the public? Anyone from the public wishing to testify on these items? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Chair, have a motion to close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made to close the public portion and seconded. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. You meant to say aye? The public portion is closed. So that means that we're done with the public testimony. We're going to deliberate in just a moment, but the stretch from our member of the audience reminded me that we should take a stretch ourselves. We'll be back in 5 minutes after a brief comfort break to have a deliberation. Thank you.
I got it. Yes. I did. The kids are having their college.
I was gonna.
He'll turn around back and then you'll zoom. No. Okay. Well, I was gonna say.
Boom, check it out.
Okay. Drive and walk.
Thank you, everybody. This committee meeting is back in session. Before we proceed with motions, I just want to explain to colleagues a couple of things. One, I think it's appropriate for us to deliberate in the same order that we considered the items. And my intrepid vice chair knows what I mean and will move the items accordingly. I also want to note that it is often the practice of this committee to take no action on contracts in order for them to be voted on immediately in the next meeting. That is not necessary in this case, because we will have a first and second reading before November 24th. November 24th is the date by which this needs to be voted on. We have a meeting the Thursday after Election Day, and then we have a meeting on the 18th of November. So we will have time for a first and second reading on police contract before the statutory date deadline of November 24th. That date popped for me just because it happens to be my birthday. It's my inclination for us to actually vote on that item tonight, and I think it would be appropriate for colleagues to have an opportunity to speak on it. So, not the usual plan, but the time affords us to proceed this way, and that's how I'm going to proceed. So having said all that, Alder DeCole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move item 1 favorably.
Second.
Item 1 has been moved and seconded. It's favorable. Discussion from colleagues. Alder Farrar Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The contract has been long past due, and I believe the police need this increase to get a momentum back and keep police officers who have been with the department for a long time. And I think that they finally gotten their due. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Farrar Santana. I see Alder Walker Myers on the queue, and then Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak in favor of this contract. When I think about all the work that went into it, I know it was really hard. Being a person that a lot of people come to talk about what's going on. I know it was really hard. I think we will feel the financial impact of this contract. I mean, it's just a reality, we will, because of it's some significant changes in it. But I also think it's an investment. I think it's a wise investment. I think the drop plan is actually really smart because I understand that absent having something to keep the officers there, we will have a really young, new police force.
Yeah.
And the reality of that and not having seasoned officers being in certain positions is concerning to me. So I think that was really smart for the city and the union to come together and do. I hope we really see the benefits of the contract. So while we're paying for it, because I'm paid for it, being able to see the benefits at the same time would be really important. So I am actually really glad that they got the contract settled in a way where both parties could walk away and feel comfortable with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Next is Alder Hamilton, followed by Alder Farrar.
Thank you, Chair Marchand. I too am in favor of this contract. I think it's long overdue for the police officers. They've been patiently waiting, and this allows them to hold on to some of their seasoned officers, which the leadership needs. So I am in favor, and I think all of our colleagues should support it as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Alder Farrar, then Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of giving this contract a favorable recommendation to the full board of voters. It's about time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am in favor of this contract. It makes us more competitive, you know, versus other cities that are comparable to New Haven. It also, you know, we forget sometimes that our police officers face a lot of challenges on a daily basis, and they are going into danger while we're running from it. And we're the ones who are calling 911 and for their assistance. And sometimes we forget that we do need them. We need them to have fair pay and fair benefits. And it was nice to hear that there are officers who have left that are reconsidering coming back. Not only that, hearing that possibly even Bridgeport and Waterbury officers, and if those are lateral moves, more to our benefit because those are experienced police officers. So if all of that does happen, if this is voted unanimously by the entire board, then there can be a lot of positives that come in the end, and perhaps we can fill all those 61 vacancies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further comments from colleagues on this item? Seeing none, I'll just add for myself that I look forward to learning in greater detail the future fiscal impact of this, which I anticipate we'll see more information about when the city comes before us with a budget amendment to update the position amounts for all the budgeted positions and then the transfers that will be required to pay for this. So I expect we'll have more thorough analysis of the future financial impact of this. But I think the hope that I have is that we'll see improvement in service and recruitment, retention of officers. And I was particularly moved, I guess, by our chief talking about the mental health of our officers. I think it's important to remember that, like many first responders, our officers see a lot of things that can be very hard to process and to cope with. And I think having a better schedule that works for them provides them better time off. Let's hope we get more officers so there's less overtime, so people can actually have time off and not be doing extra shifts. I think that will be good for their mental health, which will make them more effective servants to our public. And so there's a lot to be hoped for and more follow-up to do. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to give a favorable recommendation, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. It will move forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder DeCoe.
Chair, thank you. I'd like to move item 2 favorably.
Second.
Item 2 has been moved and seconded. This is the money for the contract with the agency that provides nurses to the city of New Haven. Discussion on the item. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard an interesting testimony in regards, well, first I have to say that I'm in favor of this item and that we give it a favorable recommendation to the full Board of Alders. We heard a interesting testimony on the numbers, and so I'm looking forward to some future conversation down the road on how we might be able to, when that negotiation comes, be a better support to the nurses who are currently working in our school system. I think that point was well heard and well taken. But once again, I'm in favor of giving this a favorable recommendation to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Next on the queue is Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I too am also in favor of this contract because our schools do need to be covered with nurses. However, we did hear a very interesting public testimony. So I think somewhere down the line, they need to look closely at the contract for the nurses and/or how do we bolster the staff of nurses, within the health department and to cover the schools, permanent nurses instead of a staffing agency. That's something important that we need to be delving into in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further discussion of this item? Any further discussion of this item? I will just note for the record that I did agree to follow up with our Director of Public Health about more information around the deployment of the nursing staff from this temp agency. And also, if there's any update to be had about whether or not any conversation has begun around a new contract, we ought to get updated on that as well. And at a minimum, we should be hearing about those things at budget time, if not sooner. But I will follow up. With Don's able assistance, I will follow up. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion for favorable recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and we'll move forward with a favorable recommendation.
Chair,
Alder DeColo.
thank you. I'd like to move item 5 favorably.
Second.
Item 5 has been moved and seconded. Item 5, just to remind colleagues, is the year-end transfer, an important piece of fiscal housekeeping that we do this time of year every year. Any discussion of this item?
In favor.
Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're in favor of those transfer just to clean up our books and move forward on a zero balance.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. It'll move forward with a favorable recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Alder DeColo.
I move item 6 as a read and file.
Second.
Item 6 has been moved and seconded. This is the June monthly, which is really subsumed into the year-end report. Any discussion of the motion to read and file for June monthly? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. We will recommend to the full board that the item be read and filed.
Mr. Chair,
Alder DeColo.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 3 favorably.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. This item is the $3 million assignment of general fund balance monies to be used by, to offset possible Board of Ed deficits. That was a bit of a mouthful, but I think that's accurately describing the item. I see Alder Rosa Ferraro Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am debating whether I'm in favor of it or not, and the reason being is because what they said and what they're doing are two different things. They explained how they were going to use the money in the beginning, and then they're doing it to do budget transfers for salary adjustments. So I think before it can be approved, I think we need to figure out what it is they're going to use the money for. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Ferraro Santana. Next on the queue is Alder Walker Myers, followed by Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I first started out this meeting, I did not know where I was, but I am speaking in favor of the item. For a particular reason, I was very concerned that it would change the amount of money we would be responsible for the next year. And they made that clear that by doing it this way, it won't. I think the harsh reality is that we understand, or I understand, I'll speak for myself, that I understand that we have a number of different challenges around the Board of Ed. Whether it's going to be used, because I was writing some notes down because I get a little crazy sometimes when I'm just sitting here listening to people talk. In the beginning, what she said was it was going to be used possibly for staffing, and that equals teachers, paras, custodian, whatever it is. I do think that we need to make sure that even if it's a cushion, they are actually trying to close that gap, right? And I did not want to ask a question when I left because I didn't want to repeat myself, but I think that it would be helpful to understand, absent having that cushion, what the reality would actually be. Because I think that's really important too. And I think we need to start figuring out and start really having some real conversations about how our schools are properly funded in the way that we all know they should be funded. And we get, in my opinion, we don't get treated fairly. Urban schools, we don't. And whenever I go somewhere, it's just this weird thing that I have. I try to visit schools, museums, it's just my thing, and aquariums. And it amazes me how, depending on where you are, what the schools actually have. It broke my heart hearing that we're dealing with mold, we're dealing with all of these different things in our school, and we know it's the reality. The money is not there. And I know I'm going a little bit to our other item we're going to talk about, but I just think that we got to start having the real conversations about what it looked like and what we all should be doing. So I am speaking in favor of it after understanding that it doesn't change our bottom line for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. On Q, I have Alders Morrison, Furlow, and Punzo. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in support of this item. The reality is everything is going up. Everything in every situation is going up. And children are a part of our legislative agenda and their needs. And we see how some of just the basic things that are not in place, how they are affecting our children. And if we don't do something, who's going to do something? And so we're in a position to be able to, make some changes and give a little more, because we have to help the children. The children are our future. I know that sounds cliche, but they are. And if we don't invest in them today, how are they going to invest in us tomorrow? Because they are the future of tomorrow. So I agree with this. Is it a transfer? Yes. No.
It's an assignment.
An assignment. I agree with making the children, the schools, a priority and reassigning these funds to that cause. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Next on the queue is Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of giving this a favorable recommendation to the Board of Alders, but I don't agree with how it's done. This is, use a polite word, it is creative accounting. It puts us in a tight place. We heard and we've been hearing from teachers that are bringing their own supplies to school, toilet paper, as if we're a third world country and we can't supply toilet paper in schools. And our teachers go in day after day and they give their best to our children. That's the only reason why I am in favor of this. But how this was done, I don't agree with it. And I am disappointed, and I understand the difference between restricted and unrestricted funds. But I'm disappointed that there's not a set criteria. And perhaps that's something that we can do when it comes before us. I don't know. But as of right now, the distribution of what it says in our package and what was said are two different things. This isn't a cushion. They need it. And it's going to go to them. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but it wasn't a transparent communication, in my point of view. But I do give it a favorable recommendation because our teachers need this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Next in the queue is Alder Punzo, followed by Alder Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of the $3 million for ed purposes, which could be many, many, many things. I do have faith in Dr. McGraw that she will use it wisely where it's needed, most needed. Being around education my whole life, it is complicated, and there's always need. And again, I agree with my colleagues, all the comments they made, but I do have faith that Dr. McGraw will spend it wisely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alder Funzo. Next is Alder Smith. And then the queue is open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have mixed emotions right now. And my reason for having these mixed emotions, I hear about these issues every day from the kids, from the teachers that call, that display their anger in regards to the conditions of the schools, from the mold to the leaky ceiling to bathrooms, dispensers off the walls, no locks on bathroom doors. So this is why my feelings are so mixed right now, because I'm hoping and praying that these funds go to where they're supposed to go. I did pose a question, and the question was flipped a couple of times in the way that they were trying to basically explain themselves. But in my hearts of hearts, I don't believe it's going to go where it's supposed to go. So by saying that, I'm not in favor of this 3 million to go to the school, to be transferred to the school system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Further discussion from colleagues about the $3 million assignment of general fund surplus to be used as a contingency for the public schools in this budget year. Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I'm going to give it a favorable recommendation. However, I think we need to know exactly how the money is going to be used. You know, definitely some accounting is needed. Okay, because you know we don't just want it to be spent willy-nilly, right? But we know it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. I think nearly everyone has spoken. Alder Festa is next on the queue. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I wasn't even going to comment on this, but, you know, I feel like I need to, and I too am torn about this. Am I in favor? Am I not in favor? You know, it's hard because of everything that even my colleagues just said tonight, a couple that, you know, we had mixed answers. It was presented one way and then presented another way. But you know what, given it thought, and I was going to say, no, I'm not going to support this, but you know what, I will support it because one of the schools that is under distress is one of mine. It's Wilbur Cross. Are you laughing at? Why? You know, I think, like, you know, we need to do better on a wide level, on a city level, on a Board of Ed level, and on a state level. And you know what, I'm going to throw in federal level as well. Because our kids, if we really say that they're going to come first, why are we putting them last? Why aren't we doing more for our kids on a federal level? You know, we forget that educational cost sharing is based on the number of students in the school. And those numbers need to be presented to the state by October 1st. What happens between October 1st and the day school ends sometime in the mid of June? Kids are welcomed up until the last day of school that are not accounted for. And yes, maybe one or two leave as well, but I think we have more kids that actually go into our schools than leave, and that we don't get the funding for them. And that's not fair. It's not fair to the teachers, it's not fair to the principals, it's not fair to the parents, and most of all, it's not fair to our kids because we're not doing enough for them. You know, I'll support this assignment of $3 million. Do I like it? No, I don't. I don't like the way it was presented to us. I don't like, but I'll quote Alder Furlow in the way, you know, the slick accounting. If that was a quote.
I believe the word was creative accounting.
A creative,
Please
sorry.
continue.
I guess I'll use mine as slick. But yes, creative accounting. You know, and let's face it, that $3 million could go towards goals that are attainable for our residents too. What do we get asked for from this board? We get asked for sidewalks. We get asked for speed humps. We get asked for tree trimming
Folks, let's stay in
road paving, things that are, meantime, our residents' mill rate is going up, and we can't give our residents what they're looking for because we don't have enough money for it. And we have to, yes, budget it, et cetera, but when we call, say, I need this, it's like, oh, you have to wait. Our residents are tired of waiting. So I'm just saying that this 3 million, we could split it, 3 different ways, right? But obviously, it's being assigned to the Board of Ed. And again, I thought I was going to vote no on this, and I will support it, but it has to be used for purposes that are legitimate and ones that are going to cater to our kids. I'll shut up now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see, I'm passionate.
Thank you for your passion and for your words, Alder Festa. I think that's everybody who wants to speak. I'll just say a couple things before we take a vote. The first is I will support this. But for me, I feel like it's a little bit too clever for its own good. And what do I mean by that? To me, the more straightforward thing that administration could have proposed is to increase the budget by $3 million. To simply say, look, the budget that you all passed back in May is just not going to be enough, and we're going to ask you to increase it by $3 million, which would be $3 million in revenue, $3 million in expenditures, and which would imply, which not just apply, it would mean that next year's amount would be $3 million more, right? That seems more honest in a way, because we're going to have that debate next spring anyway. We're going to have that debate anyway, because actually we don't need to do this technically, right? Because we could not assign these $3 million. And if at the end of the fiscal year, they're $3 million short, guess what? There'll be money assigned from the general fund balance to cover it. All of this does is it sends a message to the Board of Ed that they don't have to meet the budgeted figures that we set for them. That's what it does, right? Because you don't need to assign it. If there's a deficit, it happens anyway. It's also a way to say to the public, well, actually, we acknowledge that the kids in the schools need more money, right? So, there's sort of some value, I suppose, to kind of biting the bullet and saying, we acknowledge that it's very likely that this Board of Education is going to need $3 million more, right? So, that's a way to send a message. But technically, we don't have to do this in order for the money to be available. Now, unless we're planning to spend all of the general fund positive fund balance, which would be not a good idea because it's a reserve and we need money to be able to cope with bad outcomes. So technically speaking, this whole thing is about sending a message to the public about the importance of the schools and why we would want them to have some more money without committing to giving them $3 million more next year. And it's about sending a message to the Board of Education. You don't really need to hit the figure that we provided in our budget because we're going to set aside $3 million. We're going to assign it to be used in case you go over. Right? So that's what this is. So for me, part of me feels like, okay, let's just go ahead and bite the bullet now and say, okay, we were wrong. We should have budgeted more, $3 million more. And the honest way to do that is to put it in the revenue and to put it in the expenditure and to just bite the bullet knowing that next year, $3 million more, right? That would be the more straightforward way to do it. Otherwise, this is really just about sending a message because that $3 million will be there next June, whether we assign it or not, because we're not going to spend all 60 or 50 something million dollars of our positive fund balance. That would be nuts. So for me, when I think about this is why I was so focused on the process and I had to, kind of get my head around it before the meeting started. What is the value at this point in the game as a board of alders to send a message to the Board of Ed that, look, if you can't make the budgeted figure that we provided you, I'm pretending like the superintendent's still there. If you can't make it, we'll have your back. And saying to the public, And look, we acknowledge that there's probably gonna need to be more money spent, so we'll set it aside. So that's what we're doing here, we're sending a message. But technically, we don't actually have to do it. The money will be there. It could be assigned literally daily, it could be just transferred at the time and not assigned in advance. So for me, I think there's some value in sending that message. The part that's irritating to me is the accountability part, because we made a decision after much deliberation as a committee and as a board that this was the figure we were going to provide in this fiscal year's budget. And now we're being asked to change it, but not really. And not fully grapple with the consequences of changing it. So for me, I would rather we would just amend the dang budget by $3 million and say, look, we should have given them $3 million more. That seems kind of more honest. And it's not kicking the can down the road, which we're gonna have to deal with this next spring no matter what, right? So that's my irritation about it. But do I think it's valuable to send a message of support to the Board of Ed at a time when they're struggling? Yes. Do I think it's valuable to send a message to the teachers and the students and the public that we'll have their back if they can't hit that tough figure that we provided them? Yes, that's what this is. It's sending a message, and I'm okay with doing that. So I'll vote in favor of the motion. Any further discussion from colleagues? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. It will move forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move item 4 favorably.
Second.
Item 4 has been moved. This is and seconded. It's the $5.5 million ARPA reallocation. The queue is open. Discussion. Alder Farrar Santana, Alder Furlow, and then Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I reiterated, I'm getting tongue-tied now. I'm getting tired. As I reiterated earlier, I need accountability for the money, and I'm not going to approve anything that doesn't have a budget line item of what they're doing. So I am not in favor of this unless they give me something that I can approve, where the money's going to be spent.
So thank you for that, Alder Rosa Farrar Santana. Just to remind colleagues that I made a commitment to get that information.
Yes.
You could, of course, decide not to commit to voting yes until the second reading, and we could see how far along we are in getting that additional information.
Okay.
But as your chair, I've committed to get that.
Okay, then I take that back. I will wait until the second meeting to see if we get the information. Thank you.
Okay. So next in the queue is Alder Furlow, then Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of giving this a favorable recommendation. So I'm saying favorable too many times. Favorable recommendation. I support giving this a favorable recommendation to the full board of alders, but I may change my vote to a no when it comes to the full vote. Should we not receive the information by November, that Friday before our meeting? That information being, as you've already stated, Mr. Chair, will be a list of how these funds will be allocated, a potential list of how to be allocated, because we understand other emergencies can come up and the funds may have to be used somewhere else by an emergency, but a draft. I appreciate the fact that the superintendent mentioned that she would work on a 10-year plan. Should have been done. We're late. Let's get this done quickly. Appreciate the work that they're doing, and I know we have a lot of work. But they didn't just wake up and find mold in schools and broken toilets. This has been for a while. And so I would urge the Board of Ed to make haste and get this done as soon as possible. And I have full confidence that our superintendent will do what she said and get this list to us exponentially. How's that? Yeah, did I use it right, Mr. Chair?
I think we understand what you mean.
Close it
right away.
Okay, very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Next is Alder Morrison. And the queue's open for Alder Morris.
Thank you, Mr.
Expeditious.
Chair. So, once again, I'm in favor of this, this allocation. I have one of the schools in my ward that has the broken everything. I'm not even gonna go down the list. And the reality is, I've been on this board for almost 14 years. I've been on this committee for almost 14 years, and we've been saying the same thing for almost 14 years. There's no stewardship fund to make sure that things, when they get broke, they get fixed. What they do now, they put Band-Aids on it, and then the hole just gets bigger, bigger, and bigger. At some point, we have to say uncle. At some point, we have to fix things. And at some point, we have to make the Board of Education and our children a priority. Our former president used to always say, it's not about dollars, it's about priority. What is our priority? Are the children our priority? If they are, show it. Show it. I'm from the Show Me State, show it. So for me, you're from the Show Me State, that's right.
That's correct.
And so I feel very strongly that, yes, we cannot control the Board of Ed and where they put money. But at the same time, when rain is coming down on the children, the teachers and everybody else's head, when they come into these schools, they have to fix it. So I don't know, where everybody thinks all this money is going and whose palm is greased or whatever the situation. But we need to fix this stuff. And if we don't give dollars to fix it, again, the holes just get bigger, bigger, and bigger. And my school, all of our schools are very important to us. And if we don't do something to take care of them, they might be coming for your school next. I don't want them coming for my school. I don't want them coming from no schools. We have to fix the stuff. So I am in agreement with making sure that they get this money to fix the mold, the bathrooms, everything else that they need to fix. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morris. And next on the queue is Alder Walker-Myers, followed by Alders Punzo and Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I promise by the time I finish talking, I will have whether I'm in favor or not. I promise that. Well, yeah. So I think we have been talking a lot about the stewardship of the schools. I remember when Mayor Hart was here, we actually tried this same thing with the superintendent and trying to actually set aside money to keep up with the stewardship of the schools, and talking about how every year going forward, we was actually going to put together a capital plan for the schools. So I remember those conversations just like they were yesterday. It's unfortunate that we had all these nice shiny schools without a plan to keep them shiny. And just like a car, if you don't change the oil, that car is eventually gonna break. I talk to people all the time. I had 2 kids that went to New Haven Public Schools. They don't have dispensers in the bathroom. They don't have a lot of the basic needs. My mother was a teacher for years in New Haven Public Schools, where she brought her own supplies for kids and stuff. So this need has been around for a long time. My mother retired in 2011. So I'm all for giving the schools the money with the understanding that we really don't have line item control over the Board of Ed, right? So we gotta be clear about that. We can ask for whatever we want, right? And they can give us a whole list of stuff. But if that stuff is not done, it's actually the Board of Ed's group that kind of make sure that should be making sure that stuff gets done. So I'm wrapping up, and I'm gonna stay germane. I'm trying to figure out a way where we can have a little bit more focus along with that Board of Ed group on how the money is going to be
spent once allocated, because I think we have to try to use the tools that we actually could use without it just being talk. So I'm in favor of the money. I'm in favor of it because it's needed. But I would be very comfortable with trying to figure out how we actually make sure the money is going where they're going to potentially tell us where it's supposed to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Next is Alder Punzo, followed by Alder Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam President, said what I was going to say. I think this problem is going to continue. And I think the problem started years ago, with the shiny new schools and the upkeep. No one was proactive. They let the schools go by the wayside. They changed the custodial format into a privatization program, which I think hurt the system who's responsible for what. But there is no excuse for schools to be in the condition they are in. I am in favor of the 5.5 million, but I again agree with Madam Chair and my other colleagues that we need to know where it's being spent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Punzo. Alder Smith, and then the Cuso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everybody is saying what I was going to say, but something that Madam President hit on, I just want to elaborate a little bit more. When things are dirty, we have to clean it up, right? Just this week, I had 3 kids to put wash me on my car. And they put it all around my car, to be exact. But sitting here, it made me to think, when you take away the essential things that you actually need to make things to work properly, things begin to fail and break down. At one point, there was a plan that was set, and Alder Punzo and Madam Chair hit on it, about a 10-year plan that needs to be taken. But there was plans that was set. If there was a pump that broke, there was someone able to fix the pump. If there was a window that was broken, someone was able to fix the window, as well as dispensers. But when you bring in contractual things to expect the contractors to do it, maybe their focus is elsewhere and not where it's supposed to be. So what I'm saying is this: the system got broken and we did nothing to fix the system. That's why we're suffering. I worry, are we just going to continue, as Alder Morrison said, we've been putting these Band-Aids. Are we going to continue to put these Band-Aids, or are we going to ask for the plan that Madam President has stated that they have asked for? Okay. So I'm torn in between. Of, like I said, of not really being in favor of this because I don't think anything's going to get done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Any other colleagues wish to speak on this item? Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just clarify, because my comment before, I said Wilbur Cross, that actually applies to this item with the leaks. But, here's we asked for a lot of information tonight, requested through you, Mr. Chair, and until we get that information, I'm not going to support this for many reasons. One is we have a facilities management company that gets work orders constantly from our schools. Where are they? Why are they being ignored? Because that's a way of, getting your oil changed. And, you go to the mechanic, the lights go on saying engine problems, and no one is looking at the engine problems of our school. And I know that for a fact because I know multiple work orders were fulfilled, even for Wilbur Cross, and completely ignored. Um, who's responsible for this? I feel like no one is taking responsibility. And because of that, until somebody takes responsibility, how can we be dumping more and more money? And as Madam President mentioned earlier, I remember those conversations that we had, and we did actually in the capital budget put a lot of money for some of our schools. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of them was $5 million for one school alone. King Robinson, I think it was. That wasn't right. Anyway, it was a lot of money that we put in the capital budget for schools to get repaired. What happened to that? I mean, there's got to be some responsibility here. And if we keep just putting Band-Aids over things and ripping them off and still having the problem, the scars there, what are we doing? We're not doing anything. So until I get a better understanding of where all the funds that we throw capital-wise, even ESSER funds could have been used for some of this stuff. Where has this money been spent? How are we going to fix this? Until we get these answers, hopefully I could change my mind by the time the second reading comes around and we get this information, hopefully. But we keep throwing money at something that is not getting fixed. It's not working. My understanding too is some of these things, for example, the roofs have warranties. Has the Board of Ed looked into warranties that maybe could fix those problems? Because my understanding is some of these warranties are for 20, 25 years on roofs alone. And we should be looking into this. And I'll tell you, I did look into it. I looked to see if permits were pulled at a specific school, and there weren't any permits pulled. I did contact Board of Ed to say, hey, maybe you need to look in this area or that area, but I don't know if they did or not. Are there other schools where there are items that are broken that are under warranty? Let's find out, because that could be money that could go to fix this without us having to allocate some of these funds. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and until I see for myself some of this spending, I just can't be convinced right now. And hopefully and we will also have a capital budget that we will be hopefully allocating money towards some of this stuff, and that's going to be here before we know it. So for that reason, at this very moment, I'm not going to support this until I see the requested documents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Walker-Myers, you got back on the queue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, everybody that know me know I want to get it straight, so I'm going to provide some clarity to what I said. I said there were conversations when Mayor Hart was here about this very issue, and we talked about having a capital plan possibly for the schools. She recognized that the maintenance of all of these things wasn't done. So I just want everybody to be clear that these conversations aren't new. Now, when you guys start talking about money that was put places, I just want you to be sure of that, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying was, it was planned. So we knew way back then that we had this issue that our schools was falling apart. And I do agree with the warranty part. If it's warranties, we need to be capitalizing off of that. Like, I agree with that totally. Every warranty I ever had for my car, I'm using it, right? So I definitely agree to that. But I just want to be clear about what I said tonight. And I just can't sit back and not be clear about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Festa, are you going to clarify something that you said?
I'd like to.
Make sure you use the microphone when you do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam President. Yes, you are correct. We did have conversations, but I do remember a couple of the capital budgets where we did a lot of money. And I remember even with the then chief of operations, that he kept mentioning stewardship at our budget hearings, and that word just kept coming up. But you're right, nothing was done. We never moved forward. They were all empty words. So this is an opportunity not only for us, but for the Board of Ed to basically focus on that stewardship and really boil it down to that. So thank you for your clarification, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alder Smith, I see you want to get back on the queue.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you so very much. Thank you for your clarification, Madam President. Well, I'd like to say that we do definitely need a plan, a comprehensive plan, in which that they need to develop so that they can make sure that all of the maintenance is up to par. And then they have a plan of how to fix it when things get broken. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this time.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Further discussion from colleagues on this ARPA reallocation. I'm going to say a couple things, and I will be brief. First is, I made a commitment to get some additional information about monies that have been recently allocated to upkeep and maintenance of schools, and more detail about what particular projects these funds would be supporting, above, more detailed than what we've seen so far. So we will follow through on that diligently. The second thing I want to say is that colleagues might remember a few weeks ago, we heard an item which was about interdepartmental MOUs, a mechanism by which the city could obligate funds, and to do that before the end of the calendar year. Well, guess what? These funds would have to be obligated as well. And they would have to be obligated before the end of the calendar year. And so project numbers and more information about what these monies would be used for would be some of the information that we would get in an interdepartmental MOU between the mayor's office and the Board of Education, right? So they're going to have to provide that information anyway, because if we don't obligate these funds by the end of the calendar year, they will be gone. So there's multiple reasons for the administration to follow through on the request that we will make this week. The other thing I want to say is that one of the meetings I get invited to as the chair of finance, which I frequently miss, is a monthly meeting about stewardship of buildings in the city's physical plant. I'm going to start going to that meeting again, because I think there's actually more happening than we know. Is it as effective as it should be? Perhaps not. But I think there's a lot that is happening that we don't know, that we should know more about. And I make the commitment to my colleagues to do the work to find out more information. Finally, it's true that in a general fund budget, we allocate resources to the Board of Ed and we have no line item authority over it. But these are ARPA funds, subject to federal reporting requirements, complete with project numbers and all the internal data, right? So this money actually has to be reported on in a particular way, in a more granular way, at least to our eyes, than what we're accustomed to from the Board of Ed. So there's a number of things that give me some reassurance that we can have more accountability in this batch of reallocated money than we can in our usual general fund appropriations. And so we will follow through on all those things to make sure that we do get the accountability that we're seeking. In my position as chair is that the city has not made sufficient progress. The Board of Ed, let's say, has not made sufficient progress in providing information. By the time this is scheduled a second reading, we'll pass over. Right? We'll make sure that we get sufficient progress to give us the assurance we're looking for that these monies will be spent to the legitimate needs that our kids and our teachers and our stakeholders are telling us about, right? Because there's no doubt those buildings need work and they're going to need money to do that work. So all of those things that I've just mentioned give me some assurance and confidence, especially if I do the homework, which my friends here will make sure I do. I'm going to vote yes on this motion and encourage colleagues to do the same. Further discussion from colleagues. Alder Smith.
Being said that, Mr. Chair, I will change my vote to yes, providing that they provide all of the information that we request.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Any further discussion from colleagues? Seeing none, all in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. It will move forward with a favorable recommendation and with a lot of follow-up work that has to be done. That concludes our voting items for this evening, and before a motion to adjourn is appropriate, let me just let colleagues know, at this point, we do not have a meeting date in November, so I don't think we're gonna meet in November. So we will meet on Monday, the 9th of December. That's our next scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. I suspect by then there'll be a bunch of stuff that we'll have to do, so be ready for a busy meeting in December. Having said that, motion to adjourn is appropriate. Alderman Kohler.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. We are adjourned.